Masamune was a rare land whale who got brutally rejected by his childhood crush for being ugly. However, he spends 8 years working out to become a Chad capable of rizzing her so he can pipe her for revenge. But now all the thirsty girls in school want him too. But it all begins one morning when Masamune stares at his hot body in the mirror, knowing his face card has unlimited credit. Suddenly, his sister, Chinatsu, sees this and points out that he's being shallow, but Masamune insists that this had to be done to prevent him from returning to his fat and ugly self. Just then, their lowly mummy calls them for breakfast. But when Masamune sees her cooking has enough fat to give him a stroke, he passes on eating. After he heads to school where all the girls gawk at him, proving that you can't be considered human if you're not hot. When he stops to peep at the girls playing tennis, some of them angrily run out but only accuse the nerd in glasses of harassment, while Masamune goes off scot-free. Suddenly, one of the girls recognizes him as the new transfer student, so the other girls gather around him and shower him with attention. Pleased, Masamune activates his Riz and tells them to keep working hard as he walks off. Afterward, Masamune notices a crowd gathering as one of the hottest guys in school gives a love confession to the one they call the cruel princess Aki. There, Aki reveals that the self-absorbed wannabe Chris Hemsworth had recently bought a book about gender swapping and was writing his own story with himself as the main character. Hearing this, the students step back, but as the boy tries to explain himself, Aki adds that he has a single hair growing from the mole on his chest and nicknames him Molio, crushing any steeds he once had. Seeing this, Masamune worries about how scary the trenches of school are when Aki suddenly walks by and gives him the death stare. Later in class, the class rep Tae busts Masamune for sleeping in class. But since he's hot, he gets away with it as usual. Just then, a classmate named Shuri walks in and hands him some bread for lunch. However, when Masamune sees the amount of calories in it, he realizes he'd have to do 100 crunches at home. Shuri praises Masamune for being an all-rounder but not being stuck up, so Masamune thanks him, remembering Shuri is also quite popular with the crowd that calls him the designated bottom. However, Shuri points out that there's one person as accomplished as him in the school. Just then, Aki walks in looking for a certain student. When no one responds, she grabs Masamune by his tie and demands an answer. The simp in question identifies himself, so Aki reads out his love letter and roasts him for being a creep. She then nicknames him Jabba the Hutt and rips his letter, along with his dignity, to shreds. When she leaves, Shuri explains that Aki is just like Masamune, except her personality stinks worse than your gym socks. Tai then adds that she hates guys and gives them cruel nicknames when they confess to her, which is why they call her the Cruel Princess. When she mentions that she's the daughter of the Adagaki group, Masamune instantly recognizes the name and runs to the hallway, realizing he's finally found his arch-nemesis. Later, at lunch, Aki gets offered a ton of desserts from her lackeys as Masamune watches her to gather information. He wonders how Aki isn't hated by the girls too, but Shuri explains that most of them think she's cool because she's blunt, but the one who is always with her is Yoshino, the airhead. Masamune asks Shuri has any more information, but the only thing he knows is that she likes to eat lunch alone. At that moment, Aki steps away from the group and Masamune watches as she sends Yoshino off on an errand. Masamune plans to investigate why she eats alone, but Shuri warns that he might get cooked worse than Drake if he gets caught. Masamune insists he'll be fine and runs off to look for Aki. Unfortunately, after looking through the entire school, he can't seem to find her anywhere. Just then, he spots Yoshino and remembers she's Aki's handbag. When he sees her looking extra sus, he decides to follow her and they end up at the gym storage room. Masamune eavesdrops as Yoshino presents Aki with her lunch, but when a spider drops down in front of him, he freaks out and gives himself away. Masamune apologizes for having all the red flags of a stalker, explaining that he had no idea Aki would be there. He then spots her worrisome high-calorie meal but assures her it's not that big a deal till he spots the empty trays of food and realizes this is a pig-out session. When Aki's tummy rumbles, she quickly explains that she can't help being a gluttonous pig, and since the doctors couldn't find any parasites in her, she just has to keep eating. Masamune tries to leave, so Aki warns that if he tells anyone about it, he'll regret it. From then on, it seemed Masamune was the only boy who was able to get close to the prickly queen herself. One day during volleyball practice, Shuri points out how friendly he's become with Aki and how everyone thinks the cruel princess might actually crack this time. However, Masamune explains that Aki has actually rejected all of his advances and been mean to him. Just then, Masamune notices Aki through the window and wonders how she can stuff so much junk in such a tiny hole, but when she catches him staring, she tells him to go back to his doghouse. Suddenly, the volleyball hits Masamune right in the head, and while the girls gather to check on him, some sore loser whispers to him to not get full of himself. After school, Aki and Yoshino say goodbye to their other friends, so Aki tells Yoshino to go get her some more food. Yoshino obeys and runs off, leaving Aki alone. When she starts to take too long, Aki plans to check on her, when she runs into the pudding prince. Angered, he grabs her hair and accuses her of accepting Masamune just because he's hot. He then pulls out a pair of scissors to teach her a lesson, so Aki closes her eyes, expecting the worst, but when she opens them, Masamune is right there, stopping the scissors with his bare hands. Pudding Prince runs off, so Masamune makes sure Aki is okay. He figures Aki couldn't possibly be nasty to him now that he knows his secret and saved her. At that moment, Masamune remembered how he used to look like a walking Oreo and got bullied for it. Back then, Aki was practically Masamune's savior until he confessed his love, and she called him a pig's foot. From then on, Masamune has hated Aki's guts, which is why he now plans to do whatever it takes to make her fall in love with him, so he can dump her sorry behind. The next day at school, Masamune walks up to Pudding Prince, who apologizes for hurting his hand. Masamune accepts and heads to his locker, but when he opens it, a note falls out calling him pig's foot. Later in class, Masamune tries to figure out who could have sent the letter. He figures it can't be Aki since she likes to roast her victims publicly, but he can't think of any other suspects. Shuri and Taya ask if he's doing okay, so Masamune assures them he's fine when he suddenly hears some students talking about pig's foot in their lunch, which almost gives him a heart attack. At that moment, Masamune swears never to relive that dark time from his past, thinking that if the truth ever gets out, everyone will treat him like a cursed object. Later in class, the teacher catches Masamune spacing out again, so he sheds a tear and claims he was just that moved by the story. After class, Masamune remembers how he had to change his name and the 8 years of torture he endured from his grandfather to lose his weight. He worries that all his efforts would be undone if he doesn't figure out who sent the letter when he suddenly sees a mob of hungry students rush to the school shop. Just then, Yoshino shyly walks up and tries to push past the crowd to buy some food, but she gets pushed back and ends up flashing Masamune her full moon. Masamune goes to check on her, so Yoshino claims she's dead now and hands Masamune the list of Aki's food to buy. Masamune agrees and manages to cut through the crowd to get the food, so Yoshino takes her time counting through the buns to make sure they're correct. When she tries to leave, Masamune asks if she can go with her to see Aki, but Yoshino tries to run off, causing Masamune to pin her to the wall. When Yoshino starts to tear up, Masamune backs off and tries to explain himself. After, they head to the storage room, and Masamune figures that Yoshino is just like Cinderella getting bullied by her wicked stepmother. Yoshino heads to the storage room to deliver her food, and when Aki starts making out with her sandwich, Yoshino heads out to buy some tea. Masamune then steps in and claims he's just dropping by to see how she's doing, but gets his answer when he sees the empty plates of food. Aki asks how his hand is, so Masamune plays it cool and says it just stings a bit. Aki tells him she didn't plan to get him involved and can barely look him in the eye. So Masamune figures she couldn't possibly be the one who sent the pig foot letter. Just then, Yoshino returns and trips into cheek-flashing position, so Aki freaks out and almost pokes Masamune's eyes out. After Yoshino serves Aki her drinks, she hands one to Masamune, who's surprised by how nice she is. Aki laments that Yoshino is too humble and should be so nice to everyone, so Masamune stares at her like she just called anime cartoons. Masamune agrees that even he can't be nice to everyone, but when Aki asks what that's supposed to mean, Masamune says he wants her to rely on him more than she relies on Yoshino. When Masamune leaves the storage room, he figures Aki must be turning bright red, which means his plan is working. He had learned all of his riz from cheesy romance mangas and planned to move forward with his plan. Later, on the way home from school, Masamune stepped into a trap and got captured by Yoshino, who asked if he was trying to get back at Aki for calling him pig's foot. Suddenly, Masamune remembers his picture with Aki and realizes Yoshino was in the background. Yoshino then cuts him down as she explains that her family has served Aki's family for generations. Masamune realizes he's been caught red-handed, so he tells Yoshino to laugh if she wants, but he insists he has no regrets about trying to give Aki a taste of her own medicine. To his surprise, Yoshino tells him to carry on and offers to help him. The next day, Masamune watches Aki and her lackeys again, so he decides that he can't possibly trust Yoshino since she might be leading him into a trap. He then plans to become emo buddies with Aki on his own. Just then, Taa runs up to him to check if he's still having trouble adjusting to the school, so Masamune decides to help her with her errand so he can practice asking for emails. However, when he sees he has 0 contacts stored, Masamune's confidence plummets to 0, and he runs back to class. There he asks Shuri if sharing email addresses means the other person will find out the number of contacts they have. Shuri says it doesn't, so Masamune calms down and tries to think of a situation where it wouldn't be awkward to ask for Aki's contact. Tai suddenly announces that the school beautification committee has lost a member, and they'll need someone to fill in, so Masamune quickly volunteers. After school, Aki is surprised to see his stupid face there, but when the other girls start fawning over him, Aki walks away and ignores him. Later, Masamune is stuck on window wiping duty and laments how tough Aki is to impress. He then worries that no one would ever want to go out with him if they find out he was built like a truck tire some years ago. As he looks down, Taa walks in and apologizes for pushing something stressful on him. Masamune assures her it's fine, so she walks up and asks if he would like to go to the movies sometime. Masamune's virgin mind begins to picture the wonders of a first date, but when he remembers his revenge, he turns Taa down. Tai says she understands and runs out of the class. It then hits Masamune that he's actually popular, which gives him an ego boost. Just then, Aki shows up and asks if the girl that left was on the committee. Masamune explains that she just wanted to talk to him, so Aki sarcastically tells him it must be nice to be so popular. Masamune sees that his plan is working and tells her the only person he wants to go out with is her. Aki surprisingly thanks him, so Masamune takes the chance to ask for her contact. Aki agrees easily, but she says her phone is getting repaired and asks that they exchange contacts the next time they're on duty. Masamune agrees, but the week after, he's left waiting alone like a fool. He then notices a letter that tells him where to find the next clue. From there, he follows the trail all over the school till he ends up right back where he started and looks out the window. There, Aki reveals a sign that says she declines and walks off. Suddenly, Yoshino appears behind him and tells him how naive he is. She explains that she could easily set him up with Aki and gives him her phone number to prove it. The next day, Todd announces that the whole class will have to take supplementary classes if there's even just one failing grade on their next test. Todd figures Masamune would have it easy, but Masamune points out that Shuri doesn't appear worried at all. At this, Shuri smiles and reveals that he only managed to get single digits on all his midterms and hopes he can get double digits this time. Masamune had no idea that Shuri was as stupid as he sounded, so he offered to help him study. Later at the study hall, Masamune asks Shuri what he knows, but when Shuri already gives up, Masamune wonders what kind of sucking he had to do to get into this school. At this, Shuri proudly explains that he's one of the 7 wonders of the school, and Masamune hears a similar conversation happening behind him. He then realizes Aki is also helping Yoshino to study, and Masamune is surprised that Yoshino's airhead act was not an act. Aki mocks Masamune for being confident in teaching someone when he fell for something so simple. At this, Masamune remembers his conversation with Yoshino, and since he figures she's on his side, he suggests they make a wager to see if he and Shuri will score higher than Aki and Yoshino. He insists that if he wins, Aki will have to go on a date with him. When Aki asks what's in it for her, Masamune says she can give him any nickname she wants and he'll wear it on his back till he graduates. Interested, Aki adds that he'll also have to pay for her lunch till she says it's enough, so Masamune agrees. Shuri asks Masamune if it was really a good idea, but Masamune figures that with Yoshino's help, this would be 3 against 1. Later, Aki watches Yoshino study, so Yoshino informs her that Masamune was the first person to get perfect score on their transfer exam. Yoshino suddenly feels less confident, so Yoshino hands her a book about dating in case it comes down to it. Aki gets flustered, but she tells Yoshino it wouldn't happen even if Thanos snapped into existence. Meanwhile, Masamune stares at his phone, wondering if he should call Yoshino, but when he realizes it's his first time calling a girl, he wonders if he should waste it on a blockhead. Thankfully, Yoshino calls him first, so he picks up and asks if she'll help him with the wager. However, Yoshino tells him she can't since he just made the wager on the spot and she already had her own plans. The next day, Shuri shows Masamune yet another single-digit grade, so he promises that if all else fails, he'll get Aki to give him an embarrassing nickname too. Then Aki and Yoshino walk up, so Aki begins to quiz Masamune on possible test questions and he answers every single one without stuttering. Masamune realizes they are pretty much even, which means it will come down to their abilities. After, he continues to tutor Shuri, who struggles to stay awake. One evening, Aki even spots Masamune teaching Shuri in a cafe and is stunned by how far he would go for that date. The day of the tests, Masamune asks Shuri if he thinks he'll make it, so Shuri tells him they're in the clear thanks to Masamune. Shuri then suggests they have lunch, so Masamune goes to get some drinks. When he arrives at the vending machine, he finds Yoshino, who tells him she's sorry she couldn't help. Masamune then admits it was weird to rely on her for a fight he started, so Yoshino offers him her drink and tells him to do his best on the tests. Masamune then wonders why Yoshino would be cheering him on, so she mumbles that it doesn't matter anymore as she runs off. After, Masamune prepares to eat the lunch his mom made as he wonders what that was about. Later, the test finally begins and Masamune smirks as he sees the questions he anticipated. However, he suddenly feels the rumbling in his tummy. He flashes back to when Yoshino said it didn't matter anymore and worries that the two-faced witch laced his coffee with laxatives. As he writhes in pain, he swears not to let the girls get away with it. After the test, Masamune angrily storms over to Aki's class but ends up reaching for the wrong girl. When he says he was looking for Aki, the girl tells him Aki didn't show up to school because she had a fever. Masamune then wonders why Yoshino would give him laxatives if they had already won when he gets a text from his sister, telling him that the eggs in the lunch were basically poison. Some days later, Shuri tells Masamune to do his best in the supplementary classes, so Masamune wonders how he's the only one that got stuck in supplementary class when he spots Aki waiting in class already. As he sits right beside her, he figures that already counts as a date. The next Sunday, Masamune heads out for the real date, remembering the call with Yoshino telling him Aki was willing to do it. However, when Masamune arrives at the spot for the date, he sees Aki in a magical girl cosplay and wonders why on earth she's wearing it. Just then, a sweaty otaku walks up to her and asks if he can take her picture of her costume, but Aki has no idea what the creep is talking about. Masamune comes to her rescue, which chasing the loser away, then Aki gives him the nickname Acid Rag for being a disgusting man. Masamune asks why she's dressed like a character from a coloring book, so Aki mocks him for being inexperienced and not knowing they should wear a costume on the first date to break the ice. After this, Masamune calls Yoshino and asks how on earth Aki ended up like that, so Yoshino explains that Aki believes everything she says or does, which is why Masamune should leave it up to her. Masamune asks why she would go so far to help him, but Yoshino tells him she has to go and hangs up. Masamune returns to the date and admits to not knowing the rules of the first date, but points out that Aki thinks it's a real date. At this, Aki explains that Yoshino had told her that after he failed his test, it found him trying to slit his wrists, and Yoshino said she was the only one who could save him. Masamune wonders how Aki fell for a plot worse than a Fast and Furious movie, but they continue with the date. They head to the cinema that Aki rented out, but she tells him not to sit too close to her. The movie turns out to be a disturbing horror movie, and by the end, Aki has trouble standing up. Next, they go for dinner, and Masamune wonders how she can stuff her face after such a movie. He then remembers that the cruel queen he used to know was way more arrogant, but she didn't eat an entire family's week's worth of food in a sitting. He asks if it was something she was born with, so she explains that it started when something awful happened in her past. Just then, a little girl walks up and asks Aki why she looks like she has a little lamb. Aki then makes a scene as she tries to explain herself, so Masamune drags her out before she embarrasses herself some more. Outside, Masamune finally tells Aki that the cosplay icebreaker wasn't a real thing. Aki gets sad, so she heads into a nearby store to get changed. While she's in there, she realizes how embarrassed she is and screams out, causing Masamune to storm in on her in her underwear. Aki then punches him into a coma, where he relives the memories of when he met her. Later, Masamune wakes up on Aki's lap as he lies on a park bench. When Aki realizes he's awake, she pushes him off and says she's going home, but before she leaves, Masamune apologizes for scaring her. On the way home, Masamune calls Yoshino, who tells him that she's helping him for Aki's sake. She figures she might become more modest if Masamune dumped her, which would also benefit her. Masamune then points out that her head and lap plan was a bit much, but when Yoshino says she doesn't know what he's talking about, Masamune simply tells her he's looking forward to working with her and calls her master. Later at home, Masamune reads some brain-rot romance manga where the main character tells his ugly crush that he doesn't mind getting drenched in rain if he pretends it's from her. When he heads to school the next day, he plans to make his revenge a reality with his next scheme. During supplementary classes, Masamune sits right beside Aki and keeps staring at her. Aki gets irritated and asks why he's still staring, so he says he only has eyes for her in the cringiest way possible. After school, it starts to rain, and Aki doesn't have an umbrella, so Masamune hands her his umbrella, saying he doesn't mind getting drenched in rain if he pretends he's swimming inside her ocean. He then runs off thinking his love-bombing plan is working. That evening, Yoshino breaks the news that Aki only thinks he's being a creep, so she suggests it's time for him to mix things up and tells him to be as cold as possible the next time he sees her. When Yoshino returns to the mansion, Aki wonders what took her so long, but Yoshino continues to play dumb as she notices Masamune's umbrella. Meanwhile, Masamune consults his Riz Bible and sees that the girl typically realizes how she feels when the boy treats her like dirt, but he worries that Aki might hate him even more if he does. The next day, when Masamune spots Aki, he remembers Yoshino's words and decides to trust her. Aki tries to hand him back his umbrella, but he walks past her coldly. When he settles in class, he realizes he might have destroyed all the lickability he had built up to that point, but he continues to see it through and ignores her for the rest of the day. After school, Masamune comes face to face with Aki and figures she must be missing his cringe one-liners by now, but she ignores him too. He then tries to chase after her, but Yoshino's eyes warn him not to make a move. From then, Aki and Masamune continue to ice each other out, but Yoshino notices Aki getting more frustrated as the days go by. One evening, Aki finally confronts Masamune in full-on cruel princess mode. Masamune tries to run for the hills when Aki stones him with his umbrella and blocks him from getting away. Masamune finally breaks free and runs, but Aki yanks him by the tie and chews him out for being brain dead. But when she calms down, she asks why he's been ignoring her. Masamune almost gets rizzed up by her shy face, but he sticks to the plan and tells her it was on purpose. Aki asks why he would do that, but before Masamune can say that he likes her, Aki demands to know what he likes about her. All Masamune can think of are the things that make her the devil incarnate, so he simply says he likes everything about her. Aki's barely convinced, so Masamune suddenly runs off to call Yoshino before he screws it up even further. That evening, Masamune begs Yoshino to help him think of something to say, so the next day, Masamune shows up with a letter so his big mouth can't screw it up. Before he can slip it into her locker, Aki shows up, grabs the letter, and tosses it in the trash. She tells him she despises him and stops him from explaining himself as she runs off. Yoshino comes out of the shadows like Batman, so Masamune explains that Aki had been acting completely different from before. Hearing this, Yoshino tells him to leave it to her, explaining that nothing he says will get through to her since he can't even explain why he likes her. After Yoshino leaves, Masamune wonders whose revenge this is and decides that he couldn't possibly sit this one out. Meanwhile, Aki sits in a playground, panicking since she's never skipped class. She then blames Masamune for getting into her head as she remembers how she saw him talking to Yoshino after he ditched her. Aki then tosses his umbrella as she laments knowing it would turn out like this. Just then, Yoshino shows up and asks Eki if she is sad that she was talking to Masamune. Aki gets defensive and claims she couldn't possibly be sad over a cocky narcissist. However, when Yoshino holds her face to comfort her, Aki realizes that she's somehow always been so sharp when it comes to these kinds of things. Regardless, she insists that she'll never be sad over a guy again as she remembers the last time she was. As Aki goes on her delusional rant, Yoshino assures her that Masamune only has eyes for her and figures that Aki must like him too. Aki tries to deny it, but when she turns back, Yoshino is gone. After Aki walks home angrily and admits that she's always hurt people, so she wouldn't get hurt, but now she can't tell if Masamune likes her. Suddenly, Masamune calls out for Aki as a car almost flattens her like a pancake. Thankfully, he grabs her in time and asks what's gotten into her. Aki insists he doesn't care, but Masamune says he doesn't know what he'd do without her. At that moment, Aki lets her guard down and is about to tell Masamune how she feels when they're interrupted by the owner of the car who almost made her roadkill. Suddenly, the girl jumps into Masamune's arms and tells him she's been longing to see him. Masamune wonders who the hot nut job is as she announces that meeting him is all she prays for night and day. When she gets his name right, Masamune wonders what the heck is going on, but he tells her she must have the wrong person. Just then, her butler tells her it's time to go, so the girl hopes to see him soon and leaves. Suddenly, Masamune feels Aki's deadly aura behind him as she asks who the girl is. When Masamune says he doesn't know, Aki tells him to die and walks off. The next day at lunchtime, Masamune goes through the lunch craze just to get Aki her favorite orders. After, he takes them to the gym storage room, thinking she couldn't possibly refuse food, but before he can get closer, Yoshino shows up and starts shooting at him on Aki's orders. She then asks what he could have possibly done to make Aki this mad, so Masamune explains the weird situation with the girl. Yoshino shoots at him some more and reminds him he wasn't supposed to interfere, then she runs off mysteriously. Masamune figures he'll do things his way and tries to plan his speech to Aki, but when he pictures her as Darth Vader, he can't bring himself to enter and just leaves Hifu by the door. Once he leaves, the door opens and Aki grabs them. The next day at school, Masamune continues to wonder who the strange girl is and realizes she's actually his type. However, he laments over Aki not giving him a chance to explain. Just then, a new transfer student walks in, and it turns out to be Neko, who immediately smiles at Masamune. When Neko goes to her seat, the whole class gawks at how majestic she is. After class, Masamune tries to talk to Neko, but all the girls surround her and ask about her former school. He waits until after the next class, but the same thing happens again and for the rest of the day. Eventually, the other boys get mad that the girls keep hobbing Neko up, so they try to send Shuri to infiltrate the gang, but Masamune volunteers to go instead. When Masamune walks up, the girls can't believe how perfect his timing is, so Tad explains that Neko just revealed that she transferred to their school because of him. The girls encourage her to express her feelings, so Neko explains that 3 years ago, she stood in the cold call-in for donations, but everyone ignored her like she was selling tickets to the 4th Thor movie. However, Masamune was the only one to hand her a jacket and make a donation. When she called out after him, he simply told her to dress warmer, and somehow he instantly became an angel in her eyes. Masamune wonders what brand of acid she's on since he was still pregnant and ugly 3 years ago. However, when you and the guys buy the story, Masamune pulls Neko away to talk privately. On the way, Neko warns Masamune to slow down when she suddenly collapses and bleeds from the mouth. Masamune starts to panic, but when he helps her up, a ketchup pack falls and the jig is up. Neko assures him that at least the brand uses natural ingredients, but Masamune barely controls the urge to tape her mouth shut. He asks why she would tell such a lie when he doesn't know her, so Neko asks him to keep the truth a secret between them, even if he doesn't remember her. Masamune almost wavers at how cute she is, but when he remembers his burning hatred for Aki, he rejects Neko and tells her he has someone he likes. Neko tears up but starts asking questions about his crush. When Masamune reveals that it's one-sided, Neko asks to see who it is, so they go up to the classroom and Masamune points her out, thinking Neko will give up when she sees how beautiful Aki is. However, Neko whispered that she wouldn't be a problem and walked right up to her to introduce herself. Masamune rushes to stop her, but before he can, a student opens a window, and the wind blows Neko's skirt up, causing Masamune and Aki to realize she's going commando. After, Neko turns to Masamune and explains that she's just very conscious of her health down there, but before Masamune can process what madness this is, Aki gets up and storms out of the class. Masamune chases after her and tries to explain that he doesn't know her, so he grabs Aki, but when she tries to break free, she ends up sucker punching a teacher who catches them for skipping. Thanks to this, the teacher sentences them to clean the pool after school. After school, Masamune and Aki resume their cleaning duties, but Aki warns him to stay away from her. Masamune gets pissed off by her irritating attitude, so he grabs a hose and sprays her with it, claiming it was an accident. Aki then takes off her jacket and Masamune stares at her lack of plot. Suddenly, he notices her struggling with a bucket of water as she explains she was planning to accidentally spill it on him. Masamune reminds her he isn't wearing a swimsuit, so she get his underwear wet, so Aki tells her he can go commando with Neko. Suddenly, Aki loses her balance and falls into the pool, and as she struggles, Masamune realizes the idiot can't swim, so he jumps in after her. Once he gets her to safety, Aki reminds him that he didn't want to get wet, so Masamune says that his body kind of moved on its own. When Aki figures it was no more than that, Masamune insists that if he said it was because he liked her, she wouldn't believe him, so he apologizes for overstepping. Masamune wonders why he's feeling so annoyed by it when Aki suddenly asks him to prove it. When Masamune asks what it would take, Aki tells him to kiss her. Meanwhile, Yoshino waits in the sun because Aki is late. Suddenly, Neko shows up and asks if she knows where Masamune is. Yoshino wonders why Neko is asking her, so Neko says she figures she'd be the best person to ask, but Yoshino insists she doesn't know where he is. Back at the pool, Aki insists that kissing is the least he should be able to do if he likes her, but Masamune freezes as this would ruin his plan for the grande finale. In his vision, Aki would tell him she loves him and go for a kiss, but he would refuse her and walk away with his mission accomplished. When Masamune remains silent, Aki gets mad and tries to leave, so Masamune pulls her close. He then decides to picture her as a piece of meat and figures it would be easier than looking at her face, but when he goes in for the kiss, Aki sucker punches him. Masamune demands to know what that was for, so Aki gets shy, but Masamune demands an explanation. Just then, Ta and other members of the swim team show up and ask why they're there, so Masamune explains that they were doing their punishment when they decided to splash right in. Ta buys the story and Masamune is glad to have dodged one more bullet, so Ta tells him she's there for swim practice and wishes him good luck with the cleaning. After Aki exits the pool and says that she accepts that he loves her, but she then asks him so what and walks away, leaving Masamune infuriated. Later, Masamune wonders what Aki's problem is since she asked for the kiss when Neko walks up and says she's been looking for him. When Masamune says he doesn't have the energy to hang out, Neko pulls out a bottle and pours him a hot drink to help. Curious, Masamune takes a sip and is surprised it's salty, so Neko explains that she put in the best ingredients to help with dehydration. Masamune likes the drink and takes more, so Neko starts ranting about which vitamins and nutrients are important for the body. Masamune says he prefers using exercise and diet before turning to medicine, so Neko agrees that it's ideal and pouts. He then asks what she likes about him, thinking he can turn the situation to his advantage. Since this was the difficult question Aki asked him, he can't wait to tell Neko off when she gives a superficial answer because she doesn't really know him. However, Neko tells him she likes that he's so modest, he doesn't realize his own charms. Masamune is surprisingly rizzed up, so Neko tells him to be more confident since he's a lovely person and walks away. Masamune realizes she's tougher than he thought, so he wonders if he needs to be as unreasonably bold as she is. Meanwhile, Yoshino secretly watches Neko, hoping to cut her down from the roots because she's too dangerous. She then follows her to a neighborhood where she loses her trail. There, Neko's butler asks Yoshino what she wants with Neko, so Yoshino switches to airhead mode. Neko comes out and says Yoshino is an acquaintance of hers who works for Aki. But when Yoshino insists she doesn't know anything, Neko tells her to drop the charade. Yoshino then asks why she's so obsessed with Masamune, so Neko says he saved her in the past, but Yoshino doesn't buy it. Later, Masamune heads home planning to use Neko's line on Aki. However, when he goes in, he hears more noise than usual and is shocked to find Neko and Yoshino cooking with his micro-mom. Masamune concludes he must have entered the wrong house, but he remembers his lowly mommy is there, so he has no choice but to accept it. He immediately grabs Yoshino and heads upstairs to ask what the heck is going on. It turns out that Masamune's mom had found the girls in the neighborhood, and when she noticed they went to the same school as him, she forced them to go inside with her. Masamune apologizes for his mom's thick and empty skull, but tells Yoshino they should leave while he hides the evidence of his fat past. Yoshino points out that his room made it obvious he only thought about working out, so Masamune insisted that he couldn't take breaks on the way to being a hot stud. Just then, Neko walks into the room and calls it amazing for rehabilitation, but Masamune quickly pushes her out and asks what she needs. Neko then tells him the food is ready. When he goes downstairs, he sees they're all bathed in calories again. There, Masamune's sister says she's surprised he'd actually let his friends come over, and when Neko asks why, the little tattletale almost blows his secret about his past as a person of calorie. Masamune then changes the subject to keep his sister's mouth shut, and his mom suggests they all eat. Masamune picks off the bread on his shrimp just as Neko pulls out a ton of medication to take before eating. Lowly Mummy tells them they're supposed to enjoy their meals, but Masamune laments that calories are a problem, while Neko insists that nutrients are important. Thankfully, Lowly Mummy has no problem with Yoshido, who is willing to stuff her face. Chinatsu then suggests setting off some fireworks after, and the girls agree to the idea. Moments later, Chinatsu wears a yukata as she sets off the fireworks, so Masamune is at least grateful she got Neko to leave the house. Yoshino tells Masamune she isn't fond of fireworks because Aki had once used her as a guinea pig to test how many rocket fireworks they need to fly to the moon. Masamune feels bad for her, so he sets up some calming snake fireworks for her to watch. He then spots Neko helping Chinatsu with her yukata and can't help but notice how cute she looks. Neko joins him and says she's never had such a fun time. Then Lowly Mummy brings out some watermelon as a snack. Chinatsu suggests they have a melon spitting contest, so Yoshino joins them, and Neko laughs at how ridiculous they look. Masamune realizes they could have had a different relationship if Neko wasn't such a liar and he didn't want revenge on Aki. Later, Neko changes upstairs when she comes across Masamune's room again. When she's done, Masamune sees her off and hopes she never comes back. Then he asks Yoshino if she needs him to walk her home. Yoshino reminds him that it would give Aki the wrong idea, so he walks her to a main road where she can get a taxi. There, Yoshino warns Masamune not to get caught up in Neko's plans. Meanwhile, as Neko heads home, she holds up the picture of Chubby Masamune and insists they're more alike than he thinks. Some days later, the students rejoice as it's officially the beginning of summer vacation. Just then, Aki storms into the class and slams a flyer on Masamune's desk, asking what he's trying to pull by inviting her to the beach. Masamune figures that since they won't have any classes for 40 days, he'll go with a power play approach, thanks to what he learned from Neko. However, Aki tells him she already has plans to stay at their island villa and invites Shuri instead. But since Shuri is a spineless bottom, he insists that he doesn't want to go unless Masamune is with him. Masamune uses this to his advantage and insists they're a package deal, so Neko takes a page out of his book and insists on going if Masamune goes too. Out of nowhere, Tay says she'd love to join them, so Masamune asks Aki if she'd rather take all of them or spend her time on her private beach alone. Annoyed, Aki thinks it through and agrees. Some days later, the group heads to the island on a ship, so Yoshino approaches Masamune when he's alone. She explains that she's been researching Neko, but can't find any dirt on her, so she doesn't know why she's obsessed with him. Masamune didn't know what to make of this, but he assured Yoshino that his only goal was to get revenge on Aki so Neko wouldn't be a problem. However, Yoshino isn't convinced, so she warns that if he doesn't do something about Aki on the trip, she'll tell Aki everything. Later, the group arrives at the villa and are blown away by how amazing it looks, but Masamune is too busy wondering if Yoshino will really blow his cover. Aki tells the guys that her father's secretary, Yusaki, will be their chaperone and had arrived ahead of them. Meanwhile, Yusaki was getting dumped by her long-term situationship for being slightly bipolar and kind of a nutjob. Just then, the maid announces that Aki has arrived, so Yusaki heads out to meet her, thinking she's the only one who can comfort her. However, when she steps out to greet the girls, she notices Masamune and asks Aki what a boy is doing there. Masamune realizes he has no time to waste, and since Aki likes to look good in front of other women, he blurts out that he's dating Aki. Aki tosses her suitcase at him and warns him not to spew lies that would shock the devil, but Yusaki tells Aki that it's a good thing she's grown out of her man-hating phase. She praises her on choosing a hot boyfriend and suggests it might help with the lack of development on her chest. At this, Aki plays along and says she didn't want to make a big deal out of it. She then pulls Masamune inside. Aki scolds Masamune for putting her in a tough situation, but Masamune is grateful he read the situation correctly, and the hot secretary played along. Aki then tells Masamune that the arrangement is for when they're on the island and warns him not to take the act too far. Later, Masamune shows off his abs to impress the girls, but everyone is more focused on Tao's dive into the ocean. Masamune is glad that Shuri didn't wear a bikini to the beach, but Shuri insists he's a boy, at least on the outside. Neko then grabs Masamune and asks him to reapply her sunblock, but Masamune worries that his progress with Aki would be ruined if she saw him staring at Neko's melons. Suddenly, Aki breaks them apart and tells Neko to stop playing cheap tricks on her boyfriend. She then points out that if Yusaki were to spot them, she'd think Masamune was a cheating scumbag and Neko was the one getting played, which wouldn't look good for her family. Neko agrees to back off, so Aki grabs Masamune and pulls him somewhere private for boyfriend duties. Once they're completely alone, he wonders if she wants to get wet without water. But Aki actually tells him to get some food from Yuzaki, since there's no point pretending when no one can see them. Annoyed, Masamune heads back to the house, determined to find something to push his plan one step further. He then finds Yuzaki and gets her to make lunch for Aki. There, Masamune asks if there are any fun locations on the island, so Yusaki begins to list clubs and lounges they could try, but Masamune asks her to keep the suggestions PG Yusaki, then suggests a test of courage, and when Masamune remembers how bad Aki is with scary stuff, he figures it's the perfect plan. After, Masamune thanks her and heads out, but when he leaves, Yuzaki's true intentions of ruining Aki's chance at love leak out. In the year she was first hired by the Adagaki family, she had just been dumped by yet another suitor who didn't do well with Crazy, when she heard Aki crying on a bench close by. Yuzaki asked what happened to the donut-shaped boy she had been playing with, so Aki explained that he had left her and insisted she didn't need anyone like him again. Ever since then, Yuzaki enjoyed watching Aki head down the man-hating, dark path, which is why she now hated the idea of her loving a hunk like Masamune. That night, the group arrives at an abandoned house where only Ta looks suspiciously happy to be there. Masamune holds up paper slips to determine how they go in, so the group gets assigned numbers 1 through 6. After, Masamune watches happily as Yoshino goes in. knowing that the starting order had been completely rigged so that Aki would be too scared to move and he'd be the next to go in and save her. In his fantasy, she'd want him to be her boyfriend forever, and she'd cue the kiss. Later, inside the house, Yuzaki waits patiently for Masamune, hoping to scare him with her Joe's face mask so that Aki would see how pathetic he is and fall out of love with him. Suddenly, a psycho with a hockey mask and a chainsaw appears and starts chasing Yuzaki's ghost face. Yuzaki then runs past Aki, who collapses in fear. When Masamune arrives, he wonders who the ghost face menace is, but when she screams, he realizes it's Yuzaki. Yuzaki continues on her scared rampage as she bolts out of the house, not wanting to die so no one finds out how old she really is. However, she suddenly runs into Neko, who seems to be bleeding from the mouth again, so she runs the other way and ends up slamming into a street pole. Later, Yuzaki wakes up to find Masamune carrying her. There, Masamune apologizes for getting her involved in his schemes as he admits that he and Aki aren't really dating. Yuzaki realizes Masamune is a good kid after all, so Masamune tells her not to tell Aki she knows. Later, as they return to the mainland, Yoshino approaches Masamune and commends him on having a decent plan for once. She figures Neko should finally get the message, so she agrees not to tell Aki, but warns him not to let his guard down. Some days after, Masamune tortures himself with his usual workout routine when he suddenly gets a call from Aki. Later, he meets with Yoshino and tells her that Aki wants to hand him some of the luggage he forgot on the island in person. When Masamune starts getting smug, Yoshino warns him to think more carefully about this, as one single mistake might set him back further. After, Masamune heads back home to do some homework when he realizes his hog-shot picture is missing. He then remembers the other day when Neko came over and figures she must be responsible. The next day, Masamune thanks Aki for returning his stuff in person, so she explains that she would have delivered it, but Yuzaki started asking too many questions. Akigi then warns Masamune that he'll regret it if he continues to get close to her, which reminds him of how she used to be years ago. Suddenly, he realizes that Neko should be able to tell that the girl in the picture is Aki and the potato with eyes is him. Aki tries to make conversation with Masamune, but he's too busy wondering why Neko would steal his picture and not say anything about it. Just then, Aki snaps at Masamune that she'll be happy to leave since it's such a bother for him to talk to her. After being left behind, Masamune realizes this was exactly the kind of thing Yoshino had warned him about, so it wouldn't be a good idea to leave things as they are. Just then, he gets a call from Neko, who says she's currently alone at home, so he asks if he can come over. Later, Masamune arrives outside her apartment and Neko excitedly welcomes him in. Masamune freezes up when he realizes this would be his first official time inside a girl's apartment, but he mans up and enters. Inside, Masamune sees how impressive the apartment is, so Neko casually says it's a secondary residence that her dad uses for work. She then asks what brought Masamune there suddenly, but the idiot hadn't even thought up an excuse for coming over. He claims he was just in the neighborhood, so Neko goes along with it since she's thirstier than a single man on Tinder. Masamune suddenly asks to use the bathroom, so Neko tells him it's at the end of the hall, but instead of going there, he sneaks into one of the rooms, which he figures must be Neko's, thanks to all the pills. When he looks around, he sees a lot of X-rated romance stuff, which would explain why she's not right in the head. Then he finds the exact same manga he uses as a Riz Bible. Suddenly, Neko shows up behind him and asks if the bathroom was too hard to find. She then notices the manga and admits that she had her butler buy the same one after seeing it in his room. Masamune realizes she just admitted to sneaking into his room, so he asks if she happened to take a photo of him too. Neko admits it and pulls the photo out of her pleasure hills, saying she couldn't help herself cause he was so cute. Masamune is shocked to hear this, so he reminds her he looked like a walking meatball, but she grabs his hand as she tells him there's nothing wrong with being on the heavy side. At that point, Masamune lets his guard down completely, and she kisses him. When Masamune doesn't resist, she pushes him into baby-making position, assuring him that her butler will be away all day. Masamune starts to wonder if his revenge matters anymore, but when he remembers all the cruel things Aki did to him, including the final straw where she named him Pig's Foot, he gets even more pissed. At that point, he tells Neko that he got bullied for being a fatso with a bad personality and people only got close to him because he was rich. He then points out that Neko couldn't possibly like him genuinely, so he wouldn't want to go further with someone who's not serious. Masamune grabs the picture and starts to leave, so Neko asks if he's choosing Aki, to which Masamune reveals that it's his revenge. After, Masamune feels horrible, while Neko cries alone in her room. The next day, Masamune meets up with the group looking like he was chewed on and spat out. Shuri points out that he seems to have lost weight again, but Masamune shrugs it off. Shuri then says the only person left is Neko, so Masamune worries about how awkward it would be to see her, but Tai informs the group that she's not coming. The group heads into the park and everyone has a great time except Masamune, who still feels horrible. Later, he meets with Yoshino and she tells him Aki was in some corner gobbling ice cream like her life depended on it. She then asks why he and Aki seem to be acting strange, but Masamune vaguely remembers Aki getting pissed. When the rest of the group catches up, they begin to head home when Neko's butler drives up and heads straight for Masamune. She tells the group that Neko has gone missing and asks Masamune what he did to her since she wasn't in the apartment that morning. Masamune wonders what the big deal is till the butler reveals that she left all her seizure control medicine behind. Masamune asks if she's sick, so the butler points out that no normal person would need all the medicines she takes, causing Masamune to remember all the weird things Neko would do and realize it was not an act. He then figures she deceived them on purpose so they wouldn't think she was weak. The butler asks Masamune what he did to her since she knows he was at the apartment the day before. The whole group is shocked, including Aki, so Masamune explains that he formally told Neko he couldn't go out with her because he chose Aki. However, everyone ignores Masamune's dramatic confession and starts brainstorming ways to find Neko. Aki suggests the butler take them closer to the apartment, then she tells anyone who can't fit in the car to go with Masamune since he obviously knows where the apartment is. The rest of the group heads for the car, so Yoshino tells him she can't believe he went to Neko's apartment and joins them in the car too. Masamune can't believe he mattered so little to Aki, but he decides to focus on Neko instead. Meanwhile, the rest of the group searches the area close to her apartment, but after hours of looking, Yoshino informs Masamune that they still haven't found her. At this, Masamune figures there's still one place left to look and ends up at their school, where he happens to run into Aki again. Masamune almost thinks he's dreaming, but her flat chest and potty mouth bring him back to reality. Masamune explains that since she traveled by car, school was the only place she would know well, but Aki says she already looked everywhere with no luck. Just then, Masamune asks why she goes so far for Neko if she didn't like her, so Aki admits that she doesn't but claims that she feels bad for her since it's sad to have the person you like look the other way. Hearing this, Masamune wonders why Aki herself would brutally reject the poor simps who would worship the ground she walks on and give them awful nicknames. Since this was basically what she did to him all those years ago, Masamune turns and asks Aki if she remembers the nickname Pig's Foot, determined to tell her the truth. However, before Aki can respond, Masamune gets hit in the head by a paper plane, and they notice others coming from the roof. Masamune immediately remembers Neko telling him about her favorite part of the manga. He starts running toward the school because in the manga, the heroine gets rejected by her crush, so she heads to the roof with love letters and throws them off as airplanes. However, her crush rushes up to stop her just as Masamune does for Neko. Masamune warns her not to do the same thing the heroine did, so Neko admits she doesn't have the strength and passes out in Masamune's arms. When Aki arrives on the roof, Masamune tells her to contact the butler. Later, the group waits in the hospital when the butler comes out and tells them she's stable. She then tells Aki Neko would like to speak to her, which shocks her. While she goes in, Masamune wonders if he did the right thing by rejecting her for his revenge. Just then, Aki interrupts his thoughts and tells him Neko wants to see him too, so he heads to her room and she cheerfully suggests they talk about the past. In her previous school, all the girls were impressed by her, so one of them invited her to their villa that weekend and Neko happily accepted the invitation. The girl excitedly mentioned riding horses and playing tennis, but the other girls informed her that Neko was too frail to try such activities, which made Neko sad. Later, Neko's grandfather told her of a surgery she could try to help her condition, so Neko agreed to do it on the condition that she'd get to fall in love first. In the present, Masamune asks why she chose him in particular, so Neko claims she just randomly picked his picture from the list she had of possible suitors. Masamune insists that he never heard about being anyone's potential suitor, so Neko points out that it's not strange for rich families to pimp their kids out in secret. Masamune figures it would explain why Yoshino didn't find anything out from her research, so he asks Neko how it was to try falling in love. Neko says she thought he and Masamune were exactly alike since he also talks about love for the purpose of his goal, but the truth was actually shallow and empty, which is why her feelings didn't reach him. However, she insists she has no regrets since she got to experience one-sided love and the pain of rejection. She then tells him she'll be going somewhere far and thanks him for the memories. Meanwhile, as the girls wait, Tay confesses to Yoshino that she used to like Masamune too, but Yoshino's only surprised that she thinks this is news. Tay says she doesn't regret hiding her feelings since she gets to hang out with them, but she wonders how Aki feels about Masamune. Yoshino explains that Aki is just sad that her stomach has reached its limit again, but when she looks closer, she realizes something else might be making her sad. Just then, Masamune returns from the room, so Aki rushes to talk to him, but Masamune simply walks past her and leaves. Later, the butler informs Neko that the group has left and asks if she's really okay with letting Masamune go, so Neko says she is as she holds up another picture. Years ago, Neko was also built like an Oreo, so their families thought it would be cute to take a picture together, which is when she first met Masamune. Meanwhile, Masamune walks home and admits that he couldn't trust Neko because he knew something was strange about her, so he figures that's where he'll end up with Aki too. However, Masamune refuses to waver and insists on making Aki look his way so he can throw her away in the best way possible. At the same time, Aki goes outside her mansion to think, so she remembers her talk with Neko, who told her Masamune was being completely sincere and asks what reason she could have to reject him. At this, Aki begins to wonder if she should like him too, but she can't bring herself to show affection for such a dummy like Masamune. She then remembers her time with the round boy from her memories and insists that it was real love. Meanwhile, at Masamune's house, Masamune packs a bag to return to training so he can carry out his original plan. He walks out of the house determined while Chenatsu wonders what's wrong with him. Back at the mansion, Aki suddenly sees a stranger in the shadows, but when the person gets closer, she thinks it's the fatso of her dreams. After their reunion, fake Masamune hands the master of the house a letter from his grandfather, which states an agreement with the Adagaki family for him to marry Aki. Upon hearing this, Yoshino immediately dials Masamune, but his phone has no service since he's busy getting ripped to the middle of nowhere. Days later, the students return to school and Aki returns to cooking simps who dare confess their love to her. After, she reunites with her lackeys, Sonoka and Kikune, who ask if she should really have turned down the ace of the baseball team. However, when Aki insists he was just a musclehead, the girls praise her for being a cold-hearted witch who ruthlessly gives everyone a no. Aki points out that she did it all the time anyway, so their third friend Mary shows up and points out that she'd been spending more time with Masamune than she did with them, shocking the other girls. Aki tries to defend herself when fake Masamune shows up. The girls wonder how dumb he could be to approach the Wicked Witch of the West while being shaped like a marshmallow. But when Aki says she wouldn't mind spending time with him, the girls share a heart attack. Afterward, Aki suggests they go and complete his transfer paperwork, so they walk off, leaving the girls to wonder where in the multiverse they're in. There, Mary suggests that they had Aki wrong the whole time and she was actually just a chubby chaser. Meanwhile, Masamune struts into class, feeling good when he spots Neko and wonders what she's doing there. They step outside, and Neko explains that she already had the surgery and recovered in the hospital for over a month, so she was able to return to school. She then asks Masamune how much closer he's gotten to Aki, but Masamune confesses he was training the whole time and enduring Neko. Just then, Neko spots Aki with a person of calorie and warns him that he'll lose his chance if he waits too long. However, when Masamune sees the plot of land the guy calls his stomach, Masamune assures Neko Chubby couldn't possibly rival him. Later, after class, Shuri asks Masamune if he'd like to walk home together, but Masamune leaves to hand Aki his gift from the countryside. However, when he arrives at her class, he sees the walking throw pillow hobbing her up again. Masamune wonders who the guy is, so he introduces himself as Kanetsugu, the new transfer student. When Masamune introduces himself, Kanetsugu explains that his nickname is also Masamune, so he tells Aki not to call him that at school, so it's not confusing. Masamune then asks if he's a relative of Aki, but Kanetsugu explains that all 600 pounds of him is betrothed to her. Upon hearing this, Masamune immediately drags Yoshino to the storage room and asks how no one told him about this. Yoshino tells him she tried to, but she couldn't get through to him. Masamune asks if he might be lying, but Yoshino says she ran a signature analysis and the letter seems to be real, so he's a guest at their mansion. Masamune wonders how the cruel princess could be okay with this, so Yoshino says she's just a surprise and wonders if it's love. After, Masamune goes to collect intel on Kanetsugu, who's surprisingly good at sports even though he could easily be mistaken for the soccer ball. Kanetsugu was also smart and managed to blend in with boys and girls and somehow got Aki to turn red from his presence. After school, Yoshino tells Masamune that Aki had met him in the past, but Masamune can't understand why she'd like his fat cheeks when she tortured him for the same reason. At this, Yoshino suddenly apologizes to Masamune, so he wonders what has gotten into her too. Meanwhile, Sonoka, Kikune, and Mary meet up to discuss how unfortunate it is that their queen mother has been tainted by boy cooties. However, to their surprise, Kanetsugu walks up and asks if he can join them. Kikune immediately grabs her sword and attempts to whack him with it, but he quickly tells the girls he has something to tell them. Back at school, Ta holds a class meeting for a festival idea for the class. She then suggests they do a Snow White play with Masamune as the prince and Shuri as Snow White. Shuri tries to ask why he's the princess, but the whole class ignores him and agrees to the plan. However, all Masamune cares about is doing something about the Kanetsugu. After the meeting, Masamune spots Aki walking down the hall, so he does the wall slam on her and insists they need to talk. Aki gets up close and personal and tells him that his fly is open. So Masamune rushes to check, allowing her to walk away. Just then, Kanetsugu shows up, so Aki suggests they head to class together, leaving Masamune tweaking in the hallway while the Powerpuff Girls watch. They decide to stick to their plan to protect Aki and help Kanetsugu because during their conversation with them, Kanetsugu had insisted that Aki was too much of a goddess for him to lay a hand on her. When the girls hear that he never intends to kiss or touch Aki, they figure it's a better choice than Masamune, who would gladly pluck Aki's flower. Later, the student council meets to decide on the festival events, and Sonaka happens to be the vice president. When she discovers that Aki's class and Masamune's class have both decided to act a Snow White play, she insists they approve the play from Aki's class. Later, one of the members breaks the news to Ta, who insists it's unfair since they turned in their idea first. She rushes to confront the council members, but Mary tells her that Snow White will be acted by Aki and Kanetsugu. Masamune runs up just as Aki shows up and says it's futile for the lead roles to be acted by men. Aki and Ta continue to argue when Kanetsugu shows up and tells Aki to be more considerate of Ta's feelings, which she agrees to. Angered, Masamune suggests they hold both plays and have people decide on the best project. Ta and Aki agree to the idea, so the student council approves it, making it an official competition. Masamune then pulls Kanetsugu aside and suggests that whoever wins will get to dance with Aki at the post-festival party, so the Round Prince agrees. The day before the festival, Tae chews out Shuri for being stiff with his acting, asking how he calls himself a girl, so Shuri runs off, screaming that he's not a girl, at least on the outside. When he reaches the hallway, he bumps into Neko, who tells him she just finished making their costumes and tells him to come back as quickly as he can. After she leaves, Neko realizes that she doesn't treat him like a girl, so he starts to see her in a new light. Meanwhile, Masamune tries to lure Shuri out with pudding when Kanetsugu shows up and tells him Aki gets really happy when he gives her sweets on their breaks too. Masamune gets annoyed as Kanetsugu mouths off about how to get a girl's favor instead of a cheesy wall slam in a magazine. Masamune wonders who Kanetsugu is to be giving love advice when he can't see his toes, so Kanetsugu wishes him luck and confidently walks off. Masamune determines to be the one who dances with Aki at the party, but first he notes down that sweets are good and wall slams are bad. Meanwhile, the power-drunk girls devise a plan to make sure Masamune doesn't win, so Mary tells them she'll take care of things. Later, Kanetsugu walks home with Aki and tells her he ran into Masamune earlier. When Aki gets irritated, Kanetsugu apologizes for overstepping, so Aki tells him he's always been kind. She then spots a food truck and runs off to buy a snack, and as Kanetsugu watches her, he admits to himself that he has his reasons for deceiving Aki. Since his family has been poor for several years, they had tasked him with improving his family's situation, so he met with Yusaki, who assumed he must be the same land whale Aki was close to. Now, Kanetsugu figured Masamune wouldn't be a problem, but worries about the real fatso he's impersonating. Meanwhile, Masamune begins to sneeze while he works out, so Chainatsu calls for their mom and says Masamune has caught a cold. Immediately, lowly mommy runs out and wraps Masamune in a warm blanket so he doesn't get worse. The next day at the festival, the entire school is bubbling with excitement while the students wonder who will win between the designated bottom and the cruel princess. During assembly, Shuri worries that Masamune has caught a cold, but he assures them he's in top shape even though he isn't. The night before, the idiot had gone up the roof to prove to his mom that he was healthy, but it backfired spectacularly. However, he refuses to give up, so he doesn't lose go walking chicken leg. Just then, Neko shows up and suggests they look around the festival together, but she ends up dragging him to the nurse's office. When they sit, Neko explains that since she's been sick for years, she can tell by a touch if someone has a fever, so she tucks him into bed to get some rest. Even though she'd rather have him lose so he doesn't dance with Aki, she tells him she wouldn't do anything to betray their classmates. When she offers to be his dance partner out of pity if he loses, Masamune tells her he'll be counting on her. After, Neko heads out to buy a warm drink while Kikuna hides by the door. Meanwhile, Aki gets changed with the rest of the girls when she notices there's a lot of space in the chess department. Mary happily offers to pad her up and starts stuffing them in when Kanetsu accidentally walks in. The girls stone him with their accessories, so he wonders where he can get changed when he spots one of their students in their costume who offers to lead him to a good spot. Meanwhile, Shuri wonders how he can be more like Masamune since that's who Neko likes, so he plans to try sounding manlier. When he spots her, he decides to try it out but ends up sounding like a cowboy, which only confuses her. After, they head back to the nurse's office and find Masamune's bed empty, so they rush to ask Ta if she had seen Masamune, but she hadn't either. At this, Neko reveals that they can't find Masamune anywhere in the school. Meanwhile, Masamune finds himself tied up in a large blanket while Kikuna warns him not to try anything funny. When Masamune confronts her about kidnapping him, she tells him to build up enough muscle so she can't carry him around like a little girl. Back in the hallway, Tae asks Neko if she had any luck finding Masamune, but neither of them know where he is. Shuri comes to join them with no luck either, but he tells them he kept running into class everywhere. Back in the room, Masamune asks Kikuna what she intends to do with him, so she tells him she just needs him to stay put till Aki and Kanetsugu finish dancing. When Kekin blames him for making a move on Aki, he realizes she's trying to keep him from the play. Meanwhile, Shuri tells the girls that Aki's class is about to start their play, but they are panicking as if they had an accident. Meanwhile, Mary overhears Yoshino tell Aki that they can't find Kanetsugu anywhere, so Aki wonders if her fat crush is about to disappear at the most important moment again. Yoshino steps out to tell Masamune that she had successfully kidnapped Kanetsugu, and she realizes the same thing must have happened to him. Meanwhile, Kikume warns Masamune to stay away from Aki after this, but when Masamune insists she has no right to say that, she decides to tell him how she became her bodyguard. A year ago, there was a guy in her dojo who would resort to cheating, making him the only guy she couldn't beat. But after practice, he changed to ask a girl out, which turned out to be Aki, who cut him down with her words. Kikume explains how she then saw Aki as a true hand of justice from then on, but Masamune points out that Kikume is now resorting to the cowardly method by trying to win by default. Kikume freaks out as she sees his point, so she untees Masamune when she suddenly gets a call from Mary, who asks to speak with Masamune. Mary tries to declare their match a draw, promising to release him if he releases Kanetsugu. When Masamune figures out Yoshino must be behind it, he tells Mary he'd rather stay put since Aki's play is scheduled first, so he hangs up, knowing this would be checkmate. On the other hand, Mary curses Masamune and his unborn children when Aki runs up to ask if there's any sign of Kanetsugu. When she hears there isn't one, she insists that she'll perform the play even without a prince. Back in the makeshift prison, Kikune gets a text from Mary asking her to join the search for Kanetsugu, so she thinks Masamune must have tricked her and starts attacking. Masamune quickly opens the window, allowing Shuri and Ta to see him, so he pretends to jump, causing Kikune to jump out and land in the fountain, while Masamune holds onto the window. After, Masamune tells them how he was kidnapped but figures they'll be fine since the other class will have to cancel their play. However, when Shuri breaks the news that they've already started their play, Masamune runs over there wondering what Aki is thinking. When Masamune arrives at the play, he's surprised to see how much more professional their play looks. He then notices Neko beside him, who asks if he thinks they can win, but Masamune admits that their entire cast is on another level. Mary shows up and reveals they don't have a replacement, so Masamune asks why they let Aki go on without a prince. Mary then tells them how Aki spoke to the rest of the cast and convinced them their efforts shouldn't go to waste. This shocks Masamune while Mary cries that the play would be ruined if they can't find Kanetsugu by the end of it. At this, Masamune realizes he has to tell Yoshino to let Kanetsugu go, but when he sees her on stage as an elf, he collapses as there's no way he can get to her. Suddenly, he thinks of a way to save the play and asks Neko for help, so she runs off quickly. Moments later, Masamune goes backstage and makes a crazy suggestion to Mary to save the play. Meanwhile, the play reaches the point where Snow White needs a prince to kiss her back to life. Aki thinks no one is coming and thinks it's a realistic ending as she remembers the bouquet of flowers she found outside her window all those years ago. But even though she waited and waited, her prince never came. Suddenly, Masamune walks on stage in costume, making everyone wonder what's going on. In his previous conversation with Mary, she had reminded him that their classes were enemies, but Masamune explained that he didn't think their production deserved to be destroyed, so his action was genuinely for the sake of art. Now on stage, Masamune tries to buy the elves some time to get with the program, so they finally take the hint and welcome him as the prince, but Masamune ends up tripping. The elves rush over to help him while Mary wonders why the prince is so weak. Kikune then shows up and explains that Masamune's fever must be pretty high, so he isn't intentionally trying to ruin the play. Just then, Masamune manages to stand and tries to walk over to Aki, but when he starts to stumble, Yoshino gives him a final push and threat for him to get the job done. Masamune figures he just needs to say his final line and kiss her, so he tries to find his strength while Aki wonders what's taking him so long to fake a kiss. Masamune then rushes through his lines and kisses Aki, to the shock of the whole theater. Aki punches Masamune's lights out and the curtains close, so the crowd starts cheering while Kanetsugu finally makes it out. The next day, Sonoka announces that Aki's class won the competition, but Masamune and Aki received the awards for Best Hero and Heroine. Tae cries as she laments having to cancel the play because Masamune went to the nurse's office after, so Kanetsugu reminds her that he offered to play their prince, but she rejected him for being a big back. Sonaka then suggests they settle things from the festival with a karaoke battle, so Tae accepts and says the losers will have to pick up the entire tab. The battle begins and the students take turns singing their hearts out. Aki puts on a Grammy-worthy performance and Neko chooses to sing a song about heartbreak. Sonoka notices that Masamune seems to be tense, so she figures it is finally their chance to show Aki how pathetic he really is. When Makabe tries to sneak out, Sonoka and Kikune stop him and insist they hear him sing, so Aki comes to his rescue and tells the girls not to put any pressure on him. Masamune thanks her, but she goes back to her usual self. But when Aki returns, she hears the theme song from her favorite show. Neko then suggests they sing a duet, and for once, the girls have fun singing together, blowing the rest of the group away. Unfortunately, the rivalry returns when they disagree on which character is the best. Finally, it's Masamune's turn to damage some vocal cords, so he decides to give it his all but ends up damaging everyone's eardrums instead. Later, Aki and Masamune sit on a park bench as they wait for Yoshino to finish shopping. Aki asks why Masamune hasn't gone home like everyone else, so he says he'll go home when Yoshino returns since it's dangerous for a girl to be out late by herself, just like the last time. Masamune points out that she never thanked him for that, so Aki tells him that he's the one who goes off and does what he wants like at the cultural festival. She then asks what he wants her to do to thank him. Masamune worries this might be a trap, but he asks for a kiss regardless. Surprisingly, Aki agrees and tells him to close his eyes, so she gets close but ends up stuffing his mouth with her dessert. When he opens his eyes, he sees Yoshino and Aki, who tells him to be grateful she gave him out of her dessert. When she walks off, Yoshino tells Masamune that if he had gone for it instead of waiting, he might have gotten his revenge, and she calls him stupid and walks away. However, Masamune doesn't give up as he plans to make Aki fall in love with him on their class trip to France. One morning, Masamune was aura farming in front of his room mirror when Shinatsu barged in to tell him to control himself so that he didn't embarrass all of Japan while they were in France. When Kinu came to invite him for breakfast, he threw both ladies out of his room and stared at his book as he began plotting for his revenge against Aki. Some minutes later, Masamune arrived at a prestigious museum in France along with the rest of the students, and things were going smoothly until Aki arrived with her fiancé Kanetsu, who immediately started making smug faces at Masamune. Masamune then saw a bunch of couples in the area getting lovey-dovey with each other, and this got him excited because he realized that France was the best place to move forward with his dead or love plan, which was to make Aki fall in love with him only to dump her immediately. Out of excitement, he started speaking all the goofy French he knew until Aki interrupted him to ask if she could talk to him during free periods on their trip. Masamune was stunned when she gave a typical tsundere rant as she walked away. When he tried to follow her, he bumped into a French girl named Muriel. When he told her he was a Japanese student, she grabbed his face and claimed that he was the one she was looking for. She later introduced herself to Aki and Masamune as a second-year student who loved anime and manga. She also revealed that she was aspiring to be a romance manga artist someday, but when she showed them the manga she was working on, they realized that she was more clueless than the author of Rent a Girlfriend. Muriel then begged Masamune to be a model for her manga, and he tried to turn her down until he noticed her sizable melon staring at him in the face. When he started to fold, Aki reminded him of their arrangement, causing him to turn Muriel down by telling her of his intentions to spend his free time with Aki. Some minutes later, Aki and Masamune were walking through the street, and when Aki noticed that Masamune was holding onto her hand, she shoved him into a corner where he collided with an escaped Men in Black character. They were eventually surrounded by some other shady-looking men, and Masamune tried to use some French talk no jutsu to save them before the leader of the group showed him a recording of Muriel's rich elder brother named Frank, who told him they could only save themselves by becoming rom-com models for Muriel. A while later, Masamune explained the situation to Yoshino aboard a speedboat, and she agreed to help him out with his plan so that no one else gets in his way. The next day, Masamune and Aki met up with Muriel, and it didn't take long before Masamune started flexing his weeb knowledge by telling Muriel that romance mangas were supposed to end once the couple confessed their feelings to each other. However, Muriel said she didn't care about that, and she started to give him a sus demonstration of a love confession scene from her manga until Aki separated them. Aki then took charge as she told Muriel she'd show Muriel how rom-com characters were meant to behave, but she soon realized that she was even more clueless about romance than Muriel. Meanwhile, Yoshino was guiding Kanetsu elsewhere so that he wouldn't ruin Aki's rendezvous with Masamune, and he suddenly stopped their trip to ask her if she was hiding something from him. She tried to keep up her facade by claiming that she just wanted to spend time with him, but he said he wouldn't fall for her lies and called her a betraying little witch while showing her a picture of the fist bump she shared earlier with Masamune. Kanetsugu brought up the fact that Yoshino's family, the Koiways, were pretty famous for betrayals, and then he asked if what she was doing could be considered as going against her master's wishes since he was Aki's fiancé. However, Yoshino stood back up and told him to snitch on her if he wanted to. As she walked away, Kanetsugu told her that he wasn't intending on telling Aki about her betrayal, but rather her parents, and Yoshino stopped immediately if she heard this. He started giving a corny villain speech about how bad Yoshino was, but Yoshino cut him off by saying that she was only doing what she was doing because Kanetsugu was unworthy of Aki. She added that she thought he was untrustworthy ever since the day he appeared at Aki's home, and then he mockingly asked how he was untrustworthy since his documents were real. Yoshino stated that he was only acting like Aki was precious to him, but before she could say more, a past version of herself appeared in her mind and reminded her that if she yapped some more, her secret could get revealed. Kanetsugu started gloating over the fact that he'd silenced her, and then he added salt to injury by showing her messages on his phone which revealed that her parents were mad at her for skipping work. As he walked away, he advised Yoshino to lay low for a while so that she doesn't get relieved of her duties, and Yoshino was left battling with tears. At the same time, Masao and Aki were trying to rub their two brain cells together to figure out how to be a rom-com couple, and eventually, Masamune decided to take the lead in order to further his death or love plan. He suddenly grabbed Aki's hand and asked to have a walk with her, causing her face to turn red. As they walked along, Muriel took notes, and she pointed out that the both of them were working hard to lessen the distance between them, making Masao realize that French girls didn't know how to hold back. Eventually, Aki and Masamune got lost on how to progress with the rom-com play, and they got to a spot where they started staring at each other while Muriel read out cringe romantic dialogues for them. Aki told her to stop and started lecturing her before Masamune realized that his hands were very sweaty. He started freaking out as he wondered if Aki realized how nervous he was, but then he noticed that the hand that was holding her was completely fine. When Aki told Muriel to stop pestering them, Masamune realized that she was struggling with sweaty hands as well, and she eventually grabbed his arm again while continuing to move along. Just then, Aki fell on the floor while holding her stomach, causing Masamune to suggest they get some lunch. She waited for several minutes on a bench while clutching her stomach, and Masamune eventually arrived with the grub. Before he could even finish telling her about the McDonald's order he got her, she grabbed the bag from his hand and prepared to stuff her face with a sandwich. However, before she could start eating, Masamune pointed out that Muriel was staring a hole at them while hiding in the bushes, and this made Aki realize that they needed to eat in a rom-com way. When Masamune suggested they feed each other, Aki's face nearly exploded in embarrassment, and she immediately scooted away from him, causing him to explain that he didn't have any ulterior motives. Masamune asked if she had any other ideas, and she replied that she didn't. So they agreed to go along with the feeding thing. Aki shivered relentlessly as she presented the sandwich, to Masamune, causing him to hold her hands into a stable position as he shyly stretched to take the first bite. However, the gutless airheads ended up throwing the sandwich away and it fell into the hands of Muriel. Afterwards, Masamune started accepting the fact that they'd reached their limit when suddenly a dog started pestering Aki. Aki patted the dog on the head while telling it that she couldn't give it the sandwich, and then its owners came to take it away. After the dog left with its owners, Masamune brought up how Aki always loved dogs, and she revealed that her family used to have big dogs until a tragedy in the past made her unable to get any more dogs. Aki then told Masamune that she wasn't a big eater before and said she'd tell him why she changed and also why she couldn't accept his feelings. Several years ago, a maid stopped Aki from seeing Yoshino in order to prevent her from getting chicken pox, and as Aki walked by the hallway, she saw her parents having an intense argument in their room. Afterwards, she went outside and started playing with her two dogs named Scene and Lancelot until she saw Masamune getting bullied by her gate. Aki sent Scene after the bullies, and as Scene started barking slurs at them, she asked them what they were doing in front of her house, causing them to run away. After the idiots left, she asked Masamune his name, and after he introduced himself, she gave him a hanky to wipe himself off his snot. Much later in the day, Aki's dad invited her to have a personal dinner with him, and when she was about to go, her mom took her to a designer to have her outfit changed. The next day, Masamune gave Aki some chocolates to thank her for saving him the other day, but she rejected them and told him about how her parents' constant arguing made her sick of presents. Hearing this, Masamune started crying while expressing how badly he felt about her situation, and in response, she grabbed him by the cheek and said she'd train him so that he wouldn't get bullied anymore. She then made Lancelot chase him around for some minutes while she laughed, and the two of them had fun together for several more days until a particular day when they successfully baited the bullies into a pit trap. Masamune finished off the bullies with a fire extinguisher, and on the way home, Aki started crying as she told Masamune that her parents were separating. He immediately hugged her and claimed that he'd continue supporting her. Back in that present time, Aki told Masamune that she liked this past version of Masamune, who she thought was Kanetsugu. Masamune was stunned when he realized that the events she just narrated were different from his memories, and Aki said she couldn't accept his feelings because she didn't want to feel sad again. Masamune then remembered how he was chased by those bullies to Aki's house one night, and she turned him down in the most brutal way possible by calling him pig's foot. He then angrily told her to stop acting like the victim because she deserved everything that happened to her. When Aki left, Muriel asked Masamune to chase after her, but he said he couldn't think about anything at the moment. Later that evening, Kanetsugu met Aki while walking by the road and tried to comfort her, but she ran away from him. Meanwhile, Frank called Muriel to ask why her manga wasn't going on as planned, and she replied that she was making a new romance manga that would have a happy ending. At the same time, Aki met Yoshino by the bridge and immediately hugged her while bawling her eyes out. A few days later, all the students in school were causing a ruckus at the cafeteria, and Yoshino managed to get her lunch order before getting a call from Aki, who asked her to add 5 rice balls to the bread order she just struggled to get. After ending the call, Aki stopped eating her sandwich and she wondered what was wrong with everyone. A while later, Masamune was doing the Saitama workout routine when Yoshino stopped him by spraying his virgin stink away with deodorant mist. He said he was surprised that she knew where he was, so she revealed that she heard the weird noises he was making right of the school store. She then handed him a rice ball while telling him that his muscles wouldn't be enough to rizz out Aki, and he changed the subject by bringing up the fact that she was carrying a lot of food. Yoshino pointed out that Aki was eating a lot recently, and when he asked if she hadn't changed, Yoshino said she'd only gotten sloppier. Masamune then remembered the conversation they had on the bench and asked how it was possible for her to twist the truth so much. Yoshino guessed that she might be confused since she was going through a lot back then, and then promised to smooth things over with Aki, causing him to glaze her as she left. Meanwhile, Kanetsugu was by the hallway finishing up a call with his meth dealers when Yoshino came by. He tried to troll her based on the fact that she was scolded at home for her actions, but Yoshino said it didn't concern him as she walked by. At the same time, Masamune was fantasizing about a reality where he became the simping final boss by groveling for Aki until she forgave him for their argument, and it made him cringe so hard that he fell on the floor. Just then, Neko arrived and asked him if he was going to be free after school that day. When he asked why she was asking, she said there was somewhere she wanted to take him. After school that day, Neko and Masamune walked along the road together, and when Masamune said he was surprised by her sudden invitation, she said it was because her maid Chubby wasn't around that day. As they walked, Masamune told her about what happened between him and Aki, and said it was his fault for not being able to hold back on her. When he claimed that their argument was putting his mission in jeopardy, she asked that he still wanted Aki to fall in love with him even though he loathes her, and he replied that he'd still end up dumping her as part of his revenge plan. Neko suddenly hugged him from behind and said the reason he was choosing Aki was because of revenge and not love, adding that he wouldn't be cheating on Aki if he were to fall in love with her instead. Just when she was about to bluntly confess her love to him, Masamune grabbed her hand and ran away with her. Meanwhile, Kanetsugu went to a class where Aki and Yoshino were chilling, and he straight up coasted Yoshino while asking Aki to stop by a family restaurant on their way home together for some dessert. Aki agreed and asked Yoshino to join them, but she apologetically declined the offer by saying she needed to head back to the mansion. As Yoshino bid them farewell, Kanetsugu looked at her with a smug expression on his face, and after she left, he was about to kickstart their date when Sonoka and friends came by to stop them. Elsewhere, Masamune and Neko ran into an alley where he explained to her that they were being chased by the lackeys of Muriel's doofus big brother Frank. And as he talked, he realized that it was because of the horrible job he and Aki did at teaching Muriel about rom-coms. Eventually, they got surrounded by the men in black again, and Neko suggested throwing up some blood to cause a diversion for their escape. But Masamune said it wouldn't work because she was healthy. Just then, Frank arrived and got in Masamune's face while claiming that he ran off to Japan in the middle of his rom-com training with his sister. Masamune tried to explain that he had a good reason for it, but Frank refused to hear the virgin's words as he reached into his jacket to pull what Masone feared was a gun. However, it ended up being an envelope filled with Muriel's manuscripts, and Frank explained that Muriel spent countless nights drawing after their encounter in France because she got some inspiration from the both of them. He then stated that it was because of this inspiration that he was letting Masamune off the hook, and as he walked away, he told Masamune that he preferred happy endings because the real world was garbage. When Masamune and Neko looked through the manuscript, they saw that it was just a fan fiction version of Masamune and Aki's story where they ended up dating in the end. Masamune sat by a bench while Neko praised the story, and he wondered how he and Aki ended up at odds with each other before Neko pointed out that there was a letter inside the manuscripts. When Masamune opened the letter, he saw a message from Muriel where she told him that she did an original ending for he and Aki's story before expressing how much she loved to know them more. When Masamune checked the manuscript again, he realized that the story started out happy but didn't really get a happy ending, and he wondered if it was how things currently were in the real world. Later that night, Masamune was reading the manuscript at home when Shinatsu suddenly drop-kicked him to the floor and asked him to return the whites and socks he stole from her room the previous night. She continued to yell at him until Kinua arrived and revealed that she was the one who took the clothing because she was doing laundry for them. When she asked him about the manuscripts, he left it in her hands and went away somewhere. Meanwhile, Sonopa's group were going through pictures of Aki during school trip, and when Kanetsu told them he didn't have any pictures of Aki during her free time, Sonoka started calling him a worthless photographer, causing him to reveal that she was spending time with Masamune during those periods. He then remembered the fact that his sister Sumire was in the hospital, and he decided not to let Aki develop any affection towards Masamune. Sonoka's squad started calling Masamune names until Aki got so ticked off that she yelled at them. And then Kanetsugu suggested that Aki shouldn't hang out with Masamune anymore. After Aki left for the bathroom, Kanetsugu showed the girls the photo of Yoshino's fist bump with Masamune and told them that Aki was acting that way because she was betrayed by a close friend. When Aki returned from the restroom, she apologized for lashing out, and Kanetsugu said some romantic words to her, which made her cry. That evening, Masamune met up with Yoshino at the mansion, and he brought up how Aki acted like she didn't remember insulting him while the bullies beat him up all those years ago. He then asked if she was really telling the truth and claimed that it was actually Yoshino who gave him the nickname of Pig's Foot. Masamune claimed that he didn't have any proof since it could just be that Aki was playing dumb. And then he said that he wanted Yoshino to say it herself. He brought up how they'd been in on his plan together since day one, and then she said there was no way she was the one who did it, causing him to feel relieved until she said she was lying. Meanwhile, Aki and Kanetsugu were walking by the road, and when he asked if she had anywhere in mind to go, she said she couldn't decide yet. So he told her to take her some time to think. Back when they were at the diner, he told the other girls that his goal was to separate Aki from Masamune for good, and Sonoka suggested he use the photo of Yoshino and Masamune to spread rumors about them, but he said that was only a last resort. When they asked why, he explained that Aki's relationship with Yoshio wouldn't be the worst it could be if she found out about her relationship with Masamune, and said if they tried to make it worse, Aki would be the one who ends up hurt. He then begged the three of them to do something to make sure Yoshino doesn't get near Aki, and they all gleefully agreed to his request. Back in the present, Kanetsu decided that he'd take Aki to a place where neither Yoshino nor Masamune would show up, and when he spotted Aki staring at the Ferris wheel, he asked to go there with her. When she agreed, he held her hand as he tried to take her there, but Aki stopped and sent a text to Yoshino. At the mansion, Yoshino saw the text from Aki, and when Masamune asked why she said those harsh words to him during their past years, she replied that it was because she hated him bitterly. On that fateful day during their past years, Yoshino was lying sick in her bed, and she was told by the other maids that she couldn't see Aki until she recovered from her chicken pox. After they left, she celebrated the fact that she was free because she wouldn't have to deal with Aki's endless bad moods anymore. The next day, she went through a book she was holding where she made countless drawings and writings about Aki, and she felt that Aki would be bored since she didn't have anyone to play with. Just then, she heard some noises coming from outside, and when she checked her window, she saw Aki playing around with Masamune and her dogs, which shocked her. She felt that Masamune was doomed to a fate of getting yelled at and bullied by Aki, but then she saw Aki act cheerful towards him, and she was shocked because she thought she was the only one who keep up with Aki. When she saw how happy he was, she realized that he really liked Aki. Several days later, Aki got sick, and the maids realized that it wasn't the chicken pox from Yoshino that caused it, but rather some unknown bug, which she caught by playing around with a fat, stinky virgin. After they left, Yoshino asked Aki how she was doing, and Aki responded that she felt awful because she hated being in that room. She said it was because too many things in that room belonged to her parents, and just then, Aki's parents started having another heated argument right outside the room. Aki started crying over the fact that they mentioned divorce during their argument, and she said she'd be okay because she had Masamune, a statement which made Yoshino feel bad. Just then, Yoshino heard the voice of Masamune crying for Aki's help, so she went by the window where she saw Masamune getting bullied by a couple of scumbags. She quickly put on a wig that resembled Aki's hair and wore Aki's clothes to complete the disguise before heading back to the window to give Masamune the roast that changed his life. Back in the present time, Yoshino said that a huge weight was lifted from her shoulders when Masamune stopped coming by after that incident, and added that it wasn't good for Aki because she ended up falling apart. She cried every day and ended up hating boys. And this made Yoshino regret her actions for the first time in her life. Afterwards, she tried looking for Masamune everywhere but couldn't find him. And just when she thought there was nothing she could do to make up for it, she saw Masamune in school getting fawned over by a couple of girls. Back in the present time, Masamune asked how she could recognize him when Aki couldn't. And Yoshino explained that the reason Aki couldn't remember was because of how powerful his old image was in her mind. She also revealed that she ended up helping him out because of the fact that he remembered Aki, because it could be a way for her to finally make it up to her. Masamune then asked how he was going to be making up to her when his plan was to shatter her heart into a million pieces by making her fall for him only to dump her, and he brought up a statement Yoshino made where she claimed that dumping Aki would benefit her by making Aki more modest. Yoshino confessed that she didn't actually want him to dump her because she knew he couldn't hate Aki when he saw her for who she truly was, and she then told him that Aki was currently on a date with Kanetsu because she still thought he was the one called Pig's Foot. She said her parents and others were looking after her and then begged him to save Aki. In response, Masamune screamed out like a Dragon Ball character as he ran to meet Aki, and as he left, Yoshino prayed for him to reach Aki successfully. Meanwhile, Aki was wondering what Yoshino was doing at the moment, and all that was on Kanetsugu's mind was how he needed her to ask her family to grant him the guaranteed funds so he could save his sister. He knew that the shadow of Masamune was still living in her heart, so he decided that he'd make that shadow disappear right there in order to protect his own happiness. At the same time, Masamune ran into Sonoka and friends, and when he asked where Kanetsu and Aki were, they brought up his little rendezvous with Yoshino on the boat before asking what he intended to tell Aki. Sonoka then told him to stay away from Aki, but he instantly told her to shut up before asking them who was going to save Aki from Kanetsugu's lies. He once again asked them to tell him where they were, and when they told him, Bro ran to the amusement park at Wally West Speed. At the amusement park, Kanetsugu got some ice cream for Aki and said some calming words to her before bringing up his little sister who was in the hospital. When Aki asked if there was something she could do about it, he went on about how he wouldn't be able to repay her for what he wanted to ask, and she replied that he could ask her for anything without worrying. Just when he was about to ask her, Masamune showed up and punched him right in the face while telling him to stop using his name. Masamune then scolded Aki and told her to go on a date with the real Masamune instead of the piece of trash imposter she was currently out with. Kanetsu fought back by shoving Masamune into the ground while calling him a shallow piece of trash who only had looks to boast of. Masamune asked why he called him shallow, and he responded that he'd been popular all this time, adding that he was just annoyed because Aki looked in the direction of another man. Masamune said he got it all wrong, but then Kanetsu grabbed his shirt and said he wouldn't let a popular guy use Aki to soothe his own stupid pride. Masamune said if he had things the way Kanetsu saw it, he'd have never become popular, and when Kanetsu claimed he was showing fake humility, Masamune told him about how he used to get bullied by his classmates for being a fat kid. He then took away Kanetsu's hand as he walked towards Aki and brought up how he was saved by an arrogant girl when he ran into her yard, and this made Aki's last brain cell finally spark some life as she realized that he was the real Masamune from her past. Masamune gave her even more confirmation by saying that the fat kid that ran away from her place years ago wasn't Kanetsu but rather him, and Kanetsu tried to convince her that he was lying, but then she pointed out that he had cleavage sticking out of his shirt. When Masamune saw the cleavage, she started freaking out, and in order to save herself from the embarrassment, Kanetsu lied that she had an important meeting at the obese One Piece fanboy club as she ran away. After Kanetsu left, Aki asked Masamune if he was really the one from her past, and he responded by teasing her for going on a date with a fellow girl. Aki then asked Masamune why he previously asked her to go out with him, and he instantly felt embarrassed when he remembered how desperate he was to or farm at that moment. However, Aki surprisingly agreed to go out with him, and this left Masamune speechless. Meanwhile, Kanetsugu met up with her sister and told her about the Detroit smash she received from Masamune before expressing how relieved she was that he found out about her secret. Later that night, Masamune was running on the treadmill, and he remembered Aki telling him that she had the upper hand in their relationship since he was the one who asked her out. When Chinatsu came to call them downstairs for dinner, he was so lost in thought that he couldn't hear her, so she had to scream in a way that made him fall off the treadmill. When she went to check on him, she noticed that he was unconscious, so she ran to tell Kinue. The next day, Masamune went to school and he was greeted with a love confession by a girl who ended up turning down. As he tried to explain why he was rejecting her, the girl suddenly started calling out the rumors spreading around about how the man-hater Aki fell in love with a dork, and this made him reveal to her that they were actually dating now. the girl suddenly pounced on him and offered to be his side chick. So Masamune gave her a juice box he was carrying and told her to pretend it was him before running away. He eventually got to his locker where Neko teased him over the fact that he was in a relationship with Aki. When he tried to tell her it didn't concern her, she gaslighted him into feeling bad for her. When he tried to apologize, she stopped him and told him her intentions of enjoying the mess he was currently in before walking away. During class, Masamune remembered the recent events and then he got a text from Aki, ordering him to buy some bread for her. When it was time for lunch, the hungry students started rampaging in the cafeteria like a bunch of wild monkeys, and Masamune watched from the corner while thinking about how he didn't want to get mixed up in that mess. He then got another text from Aki, which annoyed him so much that he charged into the messy crowd and forced his way to the front, where he was shocked to see that Kanetsugu was the one serving lunch. A while later, Kanetsugu told him that the school took pity on her and let her work because she was flat broke, and when Masamune asked what she meant, she told him it was all part of her plan, which was to act like Masamune so that she could gain financial support from Aki's family. When Masamune asked why she was after financial support, she said she was going through a lot at the moment and then brought up how her plan flopped after he punched her. She then revealed that she managed to pay back all the expenses after selling her mansion, and when Masamune asked if she was doing okay, she said she felt relieved because she no longer had to keep lying to people to get by. She added that she now got to enjoy herself as she was living in an apartment with nothing tying her down, and revealed that she promised her sister a trip to the bathhouse once she gets released from the hospital. She said she was relieved by the fact that she no longer had to act like a guy, and Masamune replied that he was happy for her, causing her to tease him by asking him to marry her due to the mark he left on her jaw. She brought up how he was rich and got good grades in order to push the idea even further, but Masamune shut her off by revealing that he was already dating someone. In response, she laughed at him and made him even more embarrassed by calling Aki's name, causing him to run away from the area. Afterwards, he met up with Aki in the shed she was staying in, and when he gave her the food, she thanked him by handing him one of her snacks. He tried to reject some of the stuff she was giving him so he could stick to his diet, but she said she preferred how rounded the old Masamune was. She then invited him to get some chocolate whipped cream after school with him, but he refused, and this made her a bit sad, as she wondered how she could reward him for his efforts. However, Masamune pulled off the ultimate Riz move by holding her face and saying that just the sentiment was enough. Aki got so embarrassed that she pushed him away, and just then Yoshino came by with the kerosene Aki sent her to get. After leaving the shed, Masamune sat by a bench where he realized that he had no one to hate anymore, and when he checked his arm, he saw that there was some hives on them. Much later, Yoshino met him in a playground and she thanked him for not telling Aki what she did. Masamune said there was no point because he almost let his revenge plans slip, and in his mind, he knew he couldn't blame her because she felt bad about what she did. He then went on his knees as he begged her to give him some advice on how to handle his relationship with Aki, and in response, she told him to celebrate Aki's birthday on Christmas Eve with her. Afterwards, she told him she was going to stop contacting him secretly, and this statement left Masamune speechless. The next day, Masamune was chilling in the shed with Yoshio and Aki, and he told Aki he was born in January before asking when her birthday was. She asked when he thought it was, and he put on his best poker face while guessing that it was sometime during the summer. She said he was way off since it was on December 24th, and he noticed that the entitled look she had on her face was just as cute as it was when they were younger. He then offered to celebrate it with her, and when she agreed, he silently celebrated while giving Yoshino a lot of salute. However, Yoshino aired him as she gave Aki the meal she prepared for her, and Masamune realized how thorough she was in fulfilling their earlier agreement. Sometime later, Masamune asked Chinatsu what she'd like to do on a Christmas date, and she replied that she'd rent out a whole castle so she could dance while cosplaying as a princess. When Masamune said he'd prefer something more grounded, she said she'd have a diner at a hotel with an ocean view. When Kinuga walked into the room, Chinatsu asked her about the Christmas dates she had with her husband, and as they talked, Masamune felt that it was useless for asking them. As he walked away, Chinatsu informed him that Kinuga did a lottery in the shopping district that day, but he didn't stop to hear her before entering his room. In his room, Masamune put on a pair of geek glasses and started doing some research by reading every romance manga in his possession, and he cried when he realized that Christmas in manga stories got overshadowed by other incidents that aren't Christmas at all. Meanwhile, Aki asked Yoshino which of her outfits looked best for the Christmas date, and she replied that she looked great in all of them. In school the next day, Masamune asked Shuri about the Christmas date thing, and he replied by asking him if it was for him and Aki. Masamune told him to quiet down, so he whispered the question again, and after Masamune confirmed his suspicions to be true, he revealed that he knew plenty of exceptional restaurants in the area. He then brought out his phone and showed him a bunch of restaurants, including an Italian one which had amazing pasta and another one which had super soft Hamburg steak. Then he started strongly recommending a cafe which had pancakes that were more delicious than anything Gordon Ramsay could ever cook up, and Masamune was too stunned to even give him a reply. When Christmas Eve came, Masamune was waiting at a spot in town with a detailed note in his pocket, and soon, Aki arrived wearing clothes more stylish than Rihanna's last Met Gala outfit. Masamune teased her about her outfit, causing her to playfully punch him a couple of times before asking what the plan was for the day. He replied that he'd be simply rehashing the previous date since he couldn't come up with anything original. Afterwards, he took her to a cinema and first apologized over the fact that he couldn't rent the whole theater. There he remembered her chewing him out for being too close to her during their last cinema date, and he felt thankful that he bought one extra seat at the side just in case she got cranky again. To his surprise, she sat right beside him and said she wouldn't tell him not to sit close to her when they were talking before munching down on her popcorn. When the movie started, Masamune stared at her face and realized that the things he was feeling at that moment that made him happy weren't a lie. Meanwhile, Yoshino was cleaning the windows and another maid asked why she was looking so gloomy on Christmas Day. She replied that she didn't care about Christmas, and the maid handed her a special Christmas outfit which was all wrapped up for her. At the same time, Aki was crying over the tragic events that happened in the movie, and Masamune then told her he made reservations at a cafe nearby. Masamune followed the directions which Shuri gave him, and it led them to a building which was completely barbecued. They decided to try some other spots in town, but none of them worked out, and they sat by a branch where Aki suggested that they give up. Masamune said he couldn't give up because he'd done a ton of research before that day, and when she asked what they'd do next, he invited her to his place when they got this house. Aki asked that his family would be okay with her visiting him, and he replied that they'd probably welcome her with open arms. He then warned her that Chinatsu and Kinua might be a bit troublesome, and they braced themselves as they walked inside. However, they were stunned to see that no one was at home, and Masamune saw a note where Chinatsu informed him that she and Kinua had gone to the hot springs, which was the prize for the lottery Kinue won. She also revealed that his dad had gone on a business trip and said it was bad they couldn't go together. Masamune remembered himself ignoring Chinatsu when she was trying to tell him about it earlier, and he got hit with a huge wave of regret. When Aki saw the note, they both freaked out over the fact that they were all alone at his place. Meanwhile, Muriel was having Christmas lunch with Frank, and she handed him a sketch she made of him as a present before gaslighting him into agreeing to go to a weeb event with her. Back at Masamune's place, Masamune and Aki struggled to regain their composure, and Aki decided to break the ice by asking to have some tea. When Masamune started ranting over the fact that the tea leaves were missing, Aki came by the kitchen and asked him to get out the cups while she searched for the leaves on his behalf. While searching, she found a pancake mix in the kitchen, which they used in cooking up some pancakes, and when Aki ate the pancakes, Masamune smiled as he saw how much she was enjoying it. After feeding her some pancakes, he suddenly dragged her to his room where he showed her a photo they took together 8 years ago, and he explained that he didn't want to become his old chubby self again before asking her if he was worthless to her the way he was now. Before she could reply, Aki slipped on one of his dumbbells, making him fall on top of her in a romantic position. He suddenly got a tummy ache and ran to the bathroom, where he told her via text that there was a present for her in his jacket pocket. He said she should leave for the day after taking it and apologized before wishing her happy birthday. After she left, Masamune realized that his body reacted in a bad way every time he touched Aki. When Aki arrived home, she asked Yoshino if she didn't have womanly appeal, and Yoshino replied that she did. After opening up Masamune's present, Aki was pleased to see that it was a toy version of her dogs, and when she remembered Masamune's note, she stumbled on the ground which said that he needed to get revenge on some girl. She wondered what he meant by that. On New Year Day, the head of Neko's family wished everyone who gathered in their living room a Happy New Year, and Neko left to get some more sake when she met a little brat named Sota playing with a toy airplane. Just then, a lady named Yuriko showed up and brought up how she hasn't seen Neko since her wedding, when Neko was about Sota's age. Meanwhile, Masamune met up with a doctor who told him he couldn't figure out the cause of the reaction he was having. The doctor explained that at his age, his hormones could become a wreck at any time, and said it wasn't uncommon for even a little bit of stress to cause hives. The doctor then advised him to take it easy for a while and said he'd keep an eye on his situation as they wait for his blood test results. He then told Masamune to come see him again in a week, adding that they'd do a more thorough checkup if anything serious happened to him before then. As Masamune walked out of the hospital, he stared at the hives on his hand while thinking about all the times he made physical contact with Aki. He then stopped when he heard some people in the area making plans for their first shrine visit of the year. At the same time, Shuri asked Tayet if she'd gone for her first shrine visit of the year yet, and she replied that for the first 3 days of the year, she and her parents normally go to see relatives from both sides of the family. When she asked Shuri about his Christmas holiday, he said he spent all of his time in front of the TV binge watching all the seasons of Game of Thrones, and she expressed her desire to have fun with all their friends since they were back from holidays. Shuri then suggested they visit the shrine together, and she instantly agreed. They spotted Masamune walking by the street through the window and texted him to meet up with them. Meanwhile, Aki was at home having some snacks while thinking about what happened on Christmas Day between her and Masamune, and Yoshino interrupted her flashback to tell her that her TV show had ended. After shutting down the TV, Yoshino asked her if she was going anywhere, but she replied that she had no plans of going out in the cold weather. At the same time, Taya told Masamune about her plan to have everyone attend the shrine together, and when Shuri asked Masamune if he'd visited the shrine, yet he said he just stayed home for the first 3 days of the year. Taya then suggested they all go on that day, and when he agreed, she said she'd invite Aki and others so they could have fun together, just like they did when they went to the ocean. Masamune took one look at the hives on his hand and told them that both Aki and Yoshino were busy, so Taya said they should try asking Neko if she'd follow them. At the moment, Neko saw a past photo which gave her a flashback of the wedding where she met Masamune for the first time, and back then, Masamune was so goofy that he offered her a turkey leg he was keeping in his pocket. She suddenly got a text from Taye which invited her to come for the first shrine visit with the rest of the squad, and she got interested when she saw that Masamune was joining in. Some hours later, she met up with Masamune and the others, and when she asked if Aki and Yoshino were joining them, Masamune said something came up for them. The four of them visited the shrine together, and afterwards they got to a spot where Taye suggested they play a game called Hansetsuki. When Neko agreed to play, Masamune asked if she'd be physically capable of playing it. She said she'd be fine and brought up how everyone in her mansion used to have a grand Hansetsuki tournament during her past years. Shuri said there was a park nearby, and when they got there, they used rock, paper, scissors to split themselves into teams of 2 before starting the game of Hansetsuki. During the game, Shuri got knocked in the head by shots from Neko and Shuri, and afterwards, Masamune and Neko sat by a bench where they laughed at the silly drawings on each other's faces. Tadia and Shuri showed up and offered them drinks since they lost the game, and when Shuri asked Masamune if he wanted a sports drink, he replied that he preferred to have green tea instead so he could burn fat. Afterwards, they all said their goodbyes together, and Masamune noticed on the way home that his hives were gone. Some days later, Masamune crossed paths with Yoshino in the school hallway, and Neko watched from a distance as they didn't utter a word to each other as they walked by. A while later, Neko visited the doctor who told her to come see him again in 2 weeks, and afterwards she met up with her assistant named Shido. When she was about to enter her car, Masamune dropped by and told her he came to that hospital as well to get some test results. Neko asked if they could give him a ride, adding that they could discuss his situation when they got to her place. When they arrived at Neko's mansion, Masamune was drinking some coffee with Shido and threatened to skin him alive if he did anything weird to Neko. Neko arrived with some special Japanese treats and asked Masamune if there was something troubling him. In response, he asked her if it was possible for stress to affect someone's body when there was nothing wrong with them. He then said it was weird that the stress wasn't worse when he was hiding his origins and plotting his revenge, and he wondered if the problem was that there was something he hadn't said yet. However, he said that saying it would affect Yoshino as well, and Neko guessed that he was experiencing the stress because he didn't have a lie to tell anymore. She said he had something called burnout syndrome and explained that losing his revenge plot, which was his lifelong wish, made him experience shock, despite the fact that he's dating Aki. She then said that he didn't love Aki and brought up the fact that she once met Masamune at Yuriko's wedding long before he met Aki. Masamune tried to remember, but his brain was just too defective, so he apologized instead. She brought up the time when he told her she wasn't actually him and said she couldn't argue despite the fact that it frustrated her because she was starting her game of love based on meager memories. She then held his hand and told him that the past didn't matter because she'd fallen in love with him in the present. She asked him to stop blaming himself and drew her face closer to his as she offered to help him get over it. However, her kissing attempt was foiled by Shido, who threatened to off Masamune with a fire extinguisher, and as he begged for his life. Masamune noticed that the hives had reappeared on his hand. After that incident, he was standing by a bridge, and when he suddenly yelled out his feelings, a girl stumbled on the floor. When he rushed to check on her, he saw that it was Yoshino. At the same time, Aki waited in her room for Yoshino, and it eventually got to a point where her stomach started growling, so she went downstairs to look for Yoshino. She searched the house for Yoshino but couldn't find her, and then went to the balcony, where she asked Yoshino's sister Narino where Yoshino was. When Narino asked what was wrong, Aki explained that she wanted Yoshino to make her something since she got hungry before it was time to leave. Narino revealed that Yoshino went out shopping, and when Aki tried to remember if she sent Yoshino out to get something for her, Narino revealed that she was the one who sent her out to get something, adding that she told her to get something for herself as well. Meanwhile, Yoshino immediately tried to run away from Masamune, but her ankle gave up, causing her to fall to the ground again. Seeing this, Masamune tried to do his best Superman impression by offering to carry her home, but she sent him flying with a punch, and Masamune freaked out when he realized she used brass knuckles. When she tried to walk again, her ankle gave up again, so she begged Masamune to give her a piggyback ride back home. Elsewhere, Sonoka and the girls were worried about how late Aki was, and Sonoka suddenly started ranting about the rumors she heard that Aki was dating Masamune. However, one of them said it wasn't a rumor but a fact that Aki and Masamune were dating, and Sonoka kept arguing until Kikuna calmed her down and decided that they would ask Aki directly that day. When they realized that asking Aki about it could annoy her, they wondered what to do about the situation, and eventually Aki arrived at the diner they were in. Aki apologized for her lateness, and the girls awkwardly started complimenting her looks in response to that. Meanwhile, the people in town watched in shock as Masamune piggybacked Yoshino, and when Yoshino noticed that Masamune was struggling, she asked if she was heavy. He replied that she wasn't heavy, but he knew that she'd pluck his family jewels if he told her reason he was struggling to keep his composure was because of her massive melons that were bouncing and pressing against his back. He started thinking of all the different ways she could unalive him, and he got his nerves under control until she whispered his nickname as she asked him to put her down. She said she'd be fine if she rested in the park that was just ahead, and when Masamune tried to refuse, she expressed her concern that the people around could see her white night since she was wearing a short skirt. Hearing this, Masamune immediately ran towards the park. Back at the diner, Aki smacked on some sweets while apologizing to the girls over the fact that her schedule hadn't been aligning with theirs. The girls argued for a bit over who would pop the question to Aki, and eventually Kikuna decided to make the move herself by asking Aki if she was living a sweet life. However, Aki was an airhead who translated it as a question about sweets, so she said she was eating them quite often before stuffing some cake in her mouth. Mizuno then tried to ask her but ended up asking if the moon was lovely, which made Aki point out that it was still daytime. Aki asked why they were all acting strange that day, and Sonoka suddenly screamed like she was transforming into Super Saiyan 2 for bluntly, asking Aki if she was really hoping out with Masamune. Aki said yes, and all three girls were stunned by the fact that she had the red face of a girl who was truly in love, but they ended up agreeing on the fact that they loved that side of her. At the same time, Masamune dropped Yoshino on a bench in the park and sat by the bench where he started wondering why Yoshino was treating him like garbage. Yoshino suddenly asked if he chased Aki away during the birthday date, and he tried to make up some goofy lies to cover up his actions, but she cut him off by bringing up the fact that Aki was super depressed at the moment. Masamune was bothered by the fact that his body wasn't cooperating, and Yoshino interrupted his brainstorming by grabbing his cheeks and asking him to promise her that he'd throw Aki to a bed next time he saw her. He said he absolutely couldn't, but she pulled on his cheeks until a light bulb came on in his head. He suddenly started touching her in cozy ways, and he realized that his body didn't react negatively to it. He then said that he should have never gone out with Aki because he was having the most fun when he was devising his plan with Yoshino, and Yoshino responded by headbutting him away. On her way home, Aki remembered when Sonoka asked her how she really felt, and she ran into Kanetsugu, who asked to talk with her. Meanwhile, Masamune regained consciousness at the park, and he started to search for Yoshino before he found a writing on his face which said that he shouldn't have said what he said. He laid on the bench and felt regret because he knew it was too late for him to take it back. At the same time, Kanetsugu apologized to Aki for what she did to her, and Aki immediately asked her to raise her head back up before revealing that she'd heard the details. Aki brought up the fact that Kanetsugu needed money for her sister in the hospital and said she wasn't mad about what she did because she knew she regretted it. When Aki said it was all in the past, Kanetsugu said she was strong, and Aki responded that Kanetsugu was stronger because she had the resolve to make sacrifices for the one she loved. She said she was different because he'd been hurting someone without even knowing, and went into tears as she confessed that she wasn't brave enough to accept that fact. Kanetsugu pointed out that she was talking about Masamune, and then she advised her not to lie to her own heart. Kanetsugu brought up how she once thought that she had to do whatever it took to protect her family name, but when she got exposed by them, she ended up realizing that what really mattered was her sister's smile. She then said she felt really refreshed and told Aki to accept her feelings. When Aki got home, she saw Yoshino in her room and she asked her about what she got while she was shopping. Yoshino said she didn't get anything for herself and then told her about the ankle she sprained during her trip. Aki helped patch her up using a first aid kit and promised to take her to a hospital the next day, so she thanked her. Aki said there was no need to thank her, and Yoshino suddenly went into tears as she remembered the words of Masamune at the park. The next day, Masamune met Yoshino in school, and he was surprised by the fact that she was acting very friendly with him. He felt that it wasn't right, and when he woke up from the dream, he realized that there were some feelings he shouldn't accept. A few days later, Talia was discussing with her friends about the kind of cake to make in class, and when she asked Shuri for his opinion, he said that cakes with whipped cream would be hard to take to class because they didn't last long. When Masamune arrived in class, he was surprised by how popular Shuri was with girls, so Neko explained that he was someone known as the savior of troubled girls. They eventually met up with Talia's group and asked what they were working on. Talia said they were having a strategy meeting to plan for Valentine's Day, and this left Masamune short of words. She went further to explain that her group had asked the sweets Shogun and Shuri to be their consultant, and Shuri sidebarred Masamune to ask if he looked like a Giga-Chad while hanging out with the hotties. Masamune replied that they trusted him even though deep down he knew the ladies saw him as one of them. Talia then asked Masamune if he had any special requests for his Valentine's chocolates, and she eventually withdrew her question when she realized that he'd be getting sweets from Aki that day. That evening, Yoshino got chocolates from 3 different shops for Aki to try, and when Aki tried the chocolate from Chubby, she said it needed more depth in its flavor. When she told Yoshino to try out the next chocolate, Yoshino asked if she was rehearsing for Valentine's Day, causing her to spit out while claiming that she was only getting her carbs. Yoshino then suggested that Aki should make some homemade chocolate because it would make Masamune happy, but Aki said it would only make Masamune laugh at her, so Yoshino offered to teach her how to make it. As the days went by, Aki tried and failed with her chocolate-making lessons while Talia figured out that her chocolate recipe was above budget. The day before Valentine's, Shinatsu brought some chocolates for Masamune to try while he was running on the treadmill, and he refused to take them because he knew he'd had to run another mile in order to burn off those carbs. Shinatsu then asked if he wouldn't eat the chocolates he'd get on Valentine's Day and started teasing him by mimicking Aki, causing him to yell at her. Meanwhile, Aki finally finished up her homemade sweets, and Yoshino was thankful that they abandoned the idea of making chocolates and went for cookies instead. When Aki tried her chocolates, she realized that they were delicious, and when she offered Yoshino some, she said she didn't want any because she was headed out to do some cleanup. Aki then asked if Yoshino intended to give someone chocolates, and when she said she didn't, she told her she could always hand out obligatory gifts to people she was friends with. Yoshino said there was no point because some people didn't like chocolates, and Aki agreed with that statement. On Valentine's Day, Tadia and her friends gave all the losers in class some chocolate, and they were more than happy to receive them. Shuri hid in the corner for minutes before finally handing a box of chocolates to Neko, who thanked him for it. When Aki arrived, Neko asked if she was going to give some chocolate to Masamune, and with an embarrassed look on her face, Aki said it wasn't her business. Neko then pointed out that Valentine's Day was a day of couples and motivated her to enjoy her romance before she left. Meanwhile, Masamune got a box of chocolates from a female admirer, and he was stunned by the fact that he'd already gotten 2 full bags of chocolate in one day due to his overwhelming riz. Just then, he got a text from Aki inviting him to the school gym storage, and when he got there, she gave him a terrifying stare when she noticed the bags of chocolate he was carrying. He tried to apologize, but she said he didn't need any from her if he already had that many. When he noticed that she was carrying some sweets in the bag she was holding, he told her that he'd love to have her chocolates if she made any for him. She then handed him the cookies she made for him, and when he noticed the patches on her fingers, he asked if she burned herself. Aki said he didn't have to bother about them. After trying the chocolate, Masamune told Aki that they were delicious. Sometime later, Masamune was rushing to make it 10 minutes earlier for his date with Aki, but when he got to their meeting spot, he was surprised to see that she was already there. They eventually arrived at a restaurant where they ate some delicious food, and Masamune completely threw his fitness diet under the bus so that he could enjoy the food with her. Meanwhile, Shinatsu and Kinue were discussing how Masamune's feeding habits had changed recently, and they realized that it was because of his girlfriend. After eating at several more restaurants, Aki and Masamune were seated by a bench in the park, and Masamune realized that he'd reached his limit for the day, but he tried to open up some space in his stomach by doing some exercises, but that only made him want to throw up. After their date, Aki said she had fun, and Masamune offered to take her on another food date sometime. The next day, Yoshino was eating lunch outside school when Neko came by and asked if she was feeling lonely now that her bestie was spending all her time with Masamune. Yoshino said she just wanted Aki to be happy, and Neko replied that she wanted both Aki and Masamune to be happy. After snacking in the gym storage room with Aki, Masamune tripped on his way to class and she tried to help him up, but he was so scared of touching her that he pulled off a Spider-Man move to get back on his feet. A while later, Masamune met up with Neko, who told him that he'd gotten a bit fatter, causing him to explain that he'd been snacking all around town with his foodie girlfriend. When she asked how things were with his hives, he said he was okay, and then she asked about Aki, causing him to reveal that she had something to do that day. Sometime later, Aki met up with Neko in an empty classroom, and Neko asked her to break up with Masamune. Aki said there was no way she'd agree to that. But then Neko explained that Masamune didn't love Aki because he was tied down by his past feelings, which put him in so much pain. Aki then yelled that she already knew and revealed that she saw his revenge planner where he wrote down various methods to get her to fall for him because he hated her so much. Neko asked why she agreed to date him if she knew, and with tears in her eyes, Aki replied that it was because she loves him. She confessed that she was super happy when she found out that he was the Masamune from the past, and said it made sense if he didn't like her. Neko then asked how she could say she loved him, and Aki held her face while telling her that she would never let go of him despite how he feels because that was just how she was. To end their talk, she said her feelings were more deeply rooted, and after she left, Neko went outside where she saw that Shuri had been eavesdropping on their conversation. Aki met up with Yoshino at the school gate, and as she walked away, Yoshino noticed that something was bothering her. When she asked about it, Aki told her that she just finished having a conversation with Neko where she was told that Masamune didn't have feelings for her and that she should break up with him. Yoshino wanted to go give her a piece of her mind, but Aki stopped her. When Yoshino looked at Aki's face, she noticed that she looked dejected. Aki said that what Neko said was true because the reason Masamune was getting close to her was not because he loved her, but rather because he hated her. Yoshino said she completely got the wrong idea, and she started spilling tears as she told Aki that it was all her fault. She apologized and said that neither of them were at fault before confessing that she was the one who chased Masamune off by calling him pig's foot all those years ago. She brought up how Masamune transferred to their school to get revenge on Aki and said she pretended to help him in his mission while trying to help both of them make up. Aki complimented her by saying she worked hard, and Yoshino tearfully told her not to say that Masamune didn't love her because the feelings between them had been mutual all this time. Aki got teary-eyed again and covered her up in the umbrella before telling her that there was something she wanted her to look into for her. Meanwhile, Masamune noticed how snowy the city was as he stared outside the window, and when Shinatsu asked him to make snowmen with her, he immediately declined her offer. However, she gaslighted him into changing his mind by calling him Grandpa Party Pooper, and it didn't take long before Masamune and Shinatsu created a snowman that looked like a special grade curse from Hyuhatsu Kaizen. When Masamune took a picture of it, Shinatsu asked him if he was sending it to his girlfriend, and he replied that it wasn't important. Shinatsu then expressed her desire to meet his girlfriend and said Kinyu wanted to meet her as well before suggesting they invite her over for the weekend. She continued pestering him until he agreed to eventually introduce her to his girlfriend. In school that next day, Talia and her friends were talking about how they couldn't wait to get gifts from all the guys during White Day the following week, and all the guys in the class started freaking out when they realized they were about to spend their last dimes in gifting them. At that moment, Shuri remembered when he asked Neko why she told Aki those things, and she replied that it fit Masamune's happiness before asking if he thought she was overstepping her bounds. She then asked if pushing yourself too hard and lying to yourself is really wanting love, before saying that no one could obtain happiness from that, including Aki. She ended her speech by saying she was fine with being a villain, and back in the present, Shuri noticed that Neko wasn't in class. When Neko approached Yoshino by the hallway, Yoshino straight up coasted her and walked away. Meanwhile, Aki and Masamune were having lunch in the gym storage room, and when he brought up the picture of the snowman he sent her, she said he was really close to his sister and thanked him for sending it. He then tried to ask her to visit his home soon, but he chickened out halfway and promised to ask her later when he was ready. After school, Shuri met up with Neko and asked to walk home with her. As they walked, Neko said he could be much harsher to her if he wanted, because she did something that was worth being despised for. However, Shuri said he could never feel that way about her, and then he went on to say that he was worried about her. Neko said she didn't regret what she said to Aki, but also admitted that she was feeling guilty about it, and then she claimed that she was relieved by the fact that Aki and Masamune didn't break up. When she asked what kind of person she was, Shuri went into full simp mode, as he said she was a straightforward and kind person. That evening, Yoshino met up with Aki in her room, and Aki thanked her for telling her the truth, because it now allowed her to face Masamune with her true feelings. Meanwhile, Masamune got a call from Aki, who asked him out on a date that weekend before reminding him that White Day was coming up, and he started freaking out when he realized that he had nothing planned. Aki said she was going to handle the planning for their date because she had somewhere she wanted to take him, and Masamune agreed. Afterwards, he met up with Kinue and Shinatsu in the living room, and Kinue suggested he give his girl some homemade chocolates for White Day, so he got some ingredients with the intention of making macarons. However, his efforts to make them failed spectacularly, and he eventually decided to buy them, so he met Shuri in school the next day to ask for the best spot. Shuri took him to a fancy sweet shop where Shuri recommended he get a special set of sweets, and on their way back, Shuri told Masamune that he'd be gifting Neko the chocolates he bought for White Day. The next day, Masamune met up with Aki at the convenience store she chose for the date, and there they met one of the guys that used to bully Masamune, named Suzuki. Suzuki was surprised by how much Masamune had changed since then, and when Masamune wanted to leave, he apologized for everything he did to him. On their way back, Aki asked if he was scared when he met Suzuki, and Masamune replied that he felt that it didn't matter. When she asked if he wanted to see the other bullies, he said he didn't, causing her to point out that he'd gotten stronger now. Aki then asked him to have more confidence in himself, and they somehow made Masamune get teary-eyed as he thanked her before handing her the chocolate he got her for White Day. When he tried to touch her shoulder, she returned the gift and said she couldn't accept it before saying goodbye to him. A few days later, the teacher was calling attendance, and when he noticed that Masamune wasn't around, he said it had been a couple of days since Masamune last came to school. Some hours later, Neko, Talia, and Shuri were playing cards together, and Shuri brought up the fact that it was the 4th day of Masamune's absence before asking Neko if she knew anything about his situation. When Neko said she didn't, Shuri said Masamune also didn't respond to any of his texts or calls, and Talia guessed that he was too sick to get to the phone. However, Neko said if he reported sick, the teacher wouldn't have been calling his name every morning, and Shuri worried that his 4 days of absence without permission could damage his record. When they spotted Aki walking by with Yoshino, Tai approached them and informed them about the fact that Masamune had been absent for 4 days without contacting any of them. When Aki said she was just hearing of this, Tai was shocked, and she asked if they were still dating. Aki said they'd broken up, and this stunned everyone around, especially Yoshino, who dropped the stack of papers she was holding. Yoshino then asked what she meant, and Aki said it even more plainly that she'd broken up with Masamune, causing Yoshino to beg on his behalf. However, Aki said it wasn't up to Yoshino to decide anything for her, and she said she wouldn't discuss it any further before walking away. After she left, Talia asked Yoshino if she didn't know about the breakup, and she replied that not only didn't she know about it, but she also considered it to be a huge mistake. She decided to visit Masamune after school, and Talia and the others agreed to join her. When they arrived at Masamune's house, Talia was surprised by how nice it looked, and Neko told her that she and Yoshino had visited it before. They rang the bell but didn't get any response, and they noticed that the lights in the house weren't turned on as well. When Shuri brought up the puddings which they brought for Masamune, Chinatsu rushed out and begged for some pudding. A while later, they all sat by that dining room where Chinatsu finished up all the pudding, and when Neko noticed a bunch of unwashed dishes hanging around the house and asked if something happened at home. Chinatsu said something was going on with her mom, and then they went to Masamune's room where Kinue was crying while covered up in his bed. When Chinatsu told her that Masamune's friends had come around, she came out thinking it was Masamune, and when Chinatsu told it wasn't him, she fell to the floor and started rolling around. Chinatsu then revealed to them that Masamune took all his things and went to their grandfather's place in Shinshu. She picked up her Kinue and told them that he stopped listening to her and Kinue after his outing the previous week. She pointed out that her mom had stopped being a functional person since then, which was why the chores at home were piling up. And Yoshino realized that the outing she was talking about was his date with Aki. Afterwards, Chinatsu escorted Yoshino and the others to the gate where she thanked them for helping her mom regain some of her sanity before promising to tell them if she found anything. As they walked away, Shuri said they had no choice but to wait for him to get back, and after he left, Yoshino confronted Neko, accusing her of being the reason Aki broke up with Masamune. Yoshino then said some harsh words to Neko that made her cry and smack her in the face before telling her that what she'd been doing has been also deceitful, since she'd known where Masamune's feelings laid for a long time but chose to ignore them and sent Aki after him instead. She then said Yoshino lied about her own feelings to protect herself, and Yoshino replied that her feelings didn't matter, causing Neko to call her a coward. With tears streaming down her eyes, Neko told her to forget about her and Aki's past and claimed that she had absolutely nothing before completely breaking down. Just then, Aki showed up and told Taiya to walk Neko home. After they left, she held Yoshino's hand and asked to have a personal chat with her. Meanwhile, Masamune was thinking about how miserable he was while staring at a bonfire he created, and when his grandfather came by to give him the chocolates he bought for Aki, he threw the box in the fire. At the same time, Aki and Yoshino went to a bridge where they reminisced about all the fun they'd had together before Aki correctly pointed out that Yoshino had been burying off her own feelings despite the fact that she liked Masamune. Yoshino tried to deny it, but Aki held her by the face and asked if she liked Masamune. With tears in her eyes, Yoshino said she just wanted Aki to be happy, and Aki replied that it was something for her to decide for herself. Yoshino apologized after telling her about the time she'd been spending with Masamune, and Aki officially asked her to face her own feelings by going to tell him herself. With tears streaming from her face, Yoshino agreed and ran off, leaving Aki to drown in a pool of her own tears as well. Yoshino ran to the train station where Chinatsu texted her grandfather's address, and after she boarded a train, she started to think about all that time she'd spent with Masamune. Masamune was packing up some firewood when he suddenly got a vision of his old chubby self. We then advised by ripping off Thorfinn's eye. Have no enemies line before telling him that things would work out in the future. When the vision ended, he decided to go for his morning run. But before he could begin, he saw Yoshino, who immediately rushed to hug him. Before he could say a word, she immediately kissed him. Some days later, Chinatsu and Kinua searched through the house for Masamune, but at the moment, he was outside completing his morning run as he realized that spring had already come. Some hours later, Aki saw Yoshino all dressed up in city girl clothes, and when she asked if she was going on a date, Yoshino said she'd be back soon before leaving the house. After she left, Aki's stomach started growling, and she initially regretted not getting Yoshino to make her something before leaving, but she eventually decided to take matters into her own hands. However, she spotted a bag on the table and remembered Yoshino giving her the bag of noodles sometime earlier. She cooked up the food in the bag by herself, and as she ate it, she decided to let go of her unresolved feelings because Masamune and Yoshino were now a couple. In school the next day, the students gathered to look at the classes they'd been assigned to, and when Neko told Taiya that they were in the same class, she felt thankful about the fact that she wouldn't have to study for the entrance exams alone. Just then, Kanetsugu showed up and informed them that she'd also be in their class, and Shuri lost his cool when he saw her in a female uniform for the first time, when they noticed Yoshino struggling to jump over the giraffes in front of her to see her class. They informed her that she was also in Class E, and when Neko said she didn't want to carry their beef into the new year, Yoshino apologized for everything that happened between them. Meanwhile, Aki noticed that she was in the same class with Masamune, causing her to freak out, and Masamune made things worse by teasing her about it. During math class, Masamune asked if she knew the answer to a particular problem, and when she said that she did, he looked into her notebook to get the workings from her. Aki then started to feel miserable because the way he was talking to her made it seem like they were dating. She decided to keep her distance from him by heading to the gym storage room to snack, but it didn't take long before Masamune showed up there, with some food along with Yoshino, who pulled him away. He and Yoshino moved to a spot where she told him to wait a little longer before he starts getting close to Aki again. When Yoshino got home, she was surprised to see that Aki now had shorter hair, and when she asked why she made her hair that way, Aki said she changed things up so that she could get over Masamune faster. Yoshino told her to go to their class before playfully throwing her out of the house, and then remembered Aki telling her to go tell her feelings to Masamune, which was what she was trying to do for Aki. When Aki arrived at their class, she searched for Masamune but saw a letter addressed to her, which made her worry that he was trying to get back at her. As she ran through the halls, she remembered the time she spent with Masamune, and she eventually arrived at a window where she saw him outside. They rushed to meet each other but ended up switching spots, and when Masamune asked what Aki was doing there, she said it was her line. He chased her down to the hallway where he accidentally fell on top of her while trying to grab her, and when got back up, she told him to go continue his happy life with Yoshino. Masamune then said he wanted to apologize, and she replied that he didn't need to apologize for dating Yoshino, causing him to reveal that he wasn't actually dating her. He told her about how he turned Yoshino down when she asked to date him, and back then he told Yoshino that there was something he needed to tell Aki with all his heart. Back in the present, he told Aki about how he started his revenge journey after moving into the school, and then asked her to read through the letter he left her. When she opened the letter, she saw that he asked her to be his girlfriend, and then he expressed that same desire using words. She called him an idiot for rejecting Yoshino before asking if he was serious about dating her. He told her about how he had a crush on her ever since the days he was fat, and then she finally agreed to be his girlfriend before asking if he could kiss her. After some minutes of panicking, Bro managed to grow some marbles and he kissed her in a manner that was so intense that she slapped him. That evening, the school celebrated their post-festival party, and during the event, Taye watched along with Shuri and Kanetsugu as the students danced around a campfire, and they discussed all the different events that were still to come in the school year. Meanwhile, Neko and Yoshino were watching from a balcony, and they talked about how Masamune rejected both of them because he didn't truly love them. At the same time, Masamune walked towards the campfire with Aki and asked Aki in a cartoonish manner if she would dance with him. She took his hand and they moved along to have a romantic dance with each other. If you were Masamune, who would you have flexed your muscles in bed with? Yoshino, Aki, or maybe Neko? Let us know in the comments. That's all for today's video. If you like anime recaps like this, check out this video here.